in the last 2 years with the 118th Congress. And it is only getting more and more dramatic as we go forward today.
As we are hearing rounds of applause on the floor of the House chamber, I would point out that these nominees have just voted for themselves. Hakeem Jeffries, voting for Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker of the House, hence the applause from the Democratic side of the aisle. Mike Johnson just voted for Mike Johnson. No surprises, at least in that regard. But when we consider Hakeem Jeffries, Rick, if a lot of these people, these Republican members who have elected not to vote on the first go-around ultimately don't vote for an alternative, but instead vote present, there is a non-zero chance that Hakeem Jeffries accidentally tumbles into the speakership, right?
Yeah, most people don't understand that this is all based on the number of votes you get on the floor. If anybody walks out and changes the denominator, of 434, then the number you need to win changes. And those games are not apparent yet. Right now, we just have people withholding their vote, probably to see, as we've said, whether they can get something for that. But the bottom line is, you're right. There are parliamentary ways to actually impact the vote. And if these Republican members don't vote, then you process the 51% of those present voting in a different way. And it's beyond my comprehension that it would be the intention, especially of some of these Freedom Caucus members, to elect Hakeem Jeffries today as the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I mean, it's beyond my comprehension that any Republican on the floor today would think that's a good outcome. So I would not see that as something that's happening here, but really an effort to either embarrass Johnson or extract something from the leadership in order to get their vote.
We have more than 200 votes cast at this point, so we're getting close to knowing where we're going to stand, with 5 members of the Republican conference, to my count, Kaylee, choosing not to vote. We'll come back around on those again, as we have mentioned. But that's the state of affairs, with 110 voting for Mike Johnson here. So we're about, halfway through this process. So we'll know this hour, Kaylee, whether we're going to go into multiple rounds, as Tim Burchett himself predicted, even though he did vote for Mike Johnson. Jeannie, to Rick's point, the longer this goes, whether it's 3 rounds or longer, and you have this many holdouts, the more likely it is for something to go wrong for Mike Johnson. Will it behoove him to keep members on the floor here? There's going to obviously be a range of conversations that take place following the first round.
Yeah, the reality is it's never good to go up for a vote when you don't know that you're going to win. And he is in the position where this thing is so tight, he almost has to. But I think he's got to try to wrap this up quickly. And I would hope, for his sake, that Donald Trump is on the phone right now with these people who have held out so far. Biggs, Gosar, Cloud, and Harris. And of course, Chip Roy and some of the ones later in the alphabet, to tell them the ramifications of what they are doing. Again, the impact for the Republican Party is just dramatic. They are taking over Washington, D.C. in 17 days the president should be inaugurated. He can't even have his electoral vote certified on the 6th if they don't choose a speaker.
Well, Jeannie, that's an excellent point, and that's another way in which we draw contrast between what we're seeing take place with this speaker election for the 119th Congress, with the roll call still underway, and the 118th Congress, which was happening not in a presidential, or in the aftermath of a presidential election, where 3 days later, votes needed to be certified, electoral votes, so that Donald Trump can become the president. The constitutional deadline here, Rick, is something else we have to consider.
Yeah, I mean, January 6th is a meaningful date, and it's, next week. So they don't really have a lot of time to fiddle around. And remember, it took 4 days to resolve this, the first go round with Kevin McCarthy. They don't have 4 days. And it's highly unlikely with this leadership that they're going to want to keep these guys in over the weekend to do this. So this has got the potential right now of going into a multiple ballot, and and you never know. Maybe that's going to take some time. Maybe they got to take a break and hold a caucus meeting. And remember, this wasn't elected. This wasn't a vote that that was optional, right? Normally, yeah, you don't take a vote if you don't have all your votes lined up in advance. But this is a day in the Constitution where you pick a speaker. It's regardless of whether you got your votes lined up. So it could look sloppy. Right now, it doesn't look neat. And so, but they do have a deadline, and that deadline is January 6th, and that deadline is going to be there because the Constitution says it's there, and nobody can say, oh, let's just punt it to next week. So they are under the guise of our founding fathers at this point, who are saying, you have only a couple days to get this business done and get your act together. It would be even worse as a public relations disaster if this goes, well into the night, because I think the electorate thought by having Republicans in charge of the House, the Senate, and the White House, that all this riffraff activity would cease to exist, that they would get their act together, they would meet, whether at the halftime of a football game or down in Mar-a-Lago or in Congress, and work out all their differences, because it's one party rule in Washington. And if this party looks like it can't rule, it's going to have a very, very big impact on the midterm elections that are only 2 years away.
We have another candidate on the board. As we've been discussing this, the no vote that we expected from Tom Massey went in the form of a vote for Tom Emmer, the majority whip of the House, who has been mentioned repeatedly on short lists ever since Kevin McCarthy was initially dispatched here. With live sound coming from the House floor, that is, Kaylee, the moment that we were waiting for. The question is, will anyone join him as we seek 218 for a speaker?
Right. Well, considering Emmer himself might face a big uphill battle to get to 218
Absolutely.
if Mike Johnson can't pull this off. The same can be said, frankly, of basically every other member of the Republican conference. If we think back to Kevin McCarthy being ousted, which you were just alluding to, Emmer's bid to be speaker lasted a few hours.
That's correct, yeah.
It was incredibly short. He just couldn't get the requisite support. And that, at the end of the day, is why many strategists, including ultimately Rick and Jeannie, I think, as well as voices we have heard from frequently on Balance of Power, think it will be Mike Johnson eventually, because there just simply is no other choice.
I know Lisa feels that way as well, and it's an opportunity to add the voice of Lisa Camuso Miller, of course, Republican strategist and a veteran of former House Speaker's office, now host of the Friday Reporter podcast and former RNC communications director. Lisa, we're almost there here. We're more than halfway through the vote. If Mike Johnson doesn't get this done on the first round, what are we in for?
I don't know. I'm still pretty optimistic that it's going to happen on the first ballot. And I know that doesn't make for great TV, and then we'll have to go back to talking about other things. But I really do think that this could very well go. It just feels like the energy is very different for this particular vote than it was last go around. Mike Johnson has been crystal clear. He is not making concessions to be the speaker. He is going to govern in the way that is different than the process that happened when Kevin McCarthy was working on this particular effort. So it, to me, feels like there may be some holdouts. We're going to come back around. We're going to see if those other folks have change of heart or maybe decide that they're making a statement. So far, Massey's the only one that has defected and voted for Tom Emmer, which is also great. Tom Emmer be a great candidate, but we've seen that before. That didn't work out, and I don't expect that there's any new movement in his way. I ultimately think that Mike Johnson will be the speaker.
Well, Lisa, we have one vote for someone else other than Mike Johnson. Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina has just voted for Jim Jordan, who, of course, was the speaker candidate himself in the fall of 2023 in the aftermath of McCarthy. But that would sink it for Johnson. He can't get to 218, assuming that no one else votes present or does something else to take this majority down. We'll have to wait, of course, for the final roll call to be tallied. But Norman for Jim Jordan, Lisa, are you surprised by that?
No, not necessarily. I mean, Jim Jordan still is a voice and a name that folks have been pointing to for many, many months. So we've got an Emmer and we've got a Jordan, and that's something that I think we can watch now and see how that unfolds. But look, this is going to be decided today. It doesn't go more than another few ballots. This will be the kind of thing that everyone's trying to make this is their one and only opportunity to really speak up and make it be clear that they are not necessarily happy with the way that the leadership is moving. But you can guarantee what Jeannie and Rick said is that their phones are ringing nonstop. You know that people are working behind the scenes to get this done and get this done right quickly.
If you're just joining us on Bloomberg TV and radio, the roll call vote underway live as we speak in the House of Representatives with now 4 candidates on the board for Speaker. Mike Johnson still expected to close the deal today, as we're just hearing from Lisa. Hakeem Jeffries expected to be minority leader, but we now have Tom Emmer and Jim Jordan on the board. That round of applause for Nancy Pelosi, by the way. Kaylee, we're told reportedly from C-SPAN, the first time she's been on the floor without wearing heels
after a hip
in her
replacement.
congressional career.
Pretty remarkable.
It says a lot, though, about the math that people like Nancy Pelosi had to be in the room today, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely. We are talking about the narrowest possible of margins, which is why it is also going to be critically important how ultimately these 5 Republican holdouts who have not voted vote. If they decide to do so or just vote present, that changes the math as we try to get to 218, puts it, or whatever number ultimately it will be of those who are present and voting, could put Hakeem Jeffries within reach of becoming Speaker, although it's unlikely any Republican actually wants to see that happen.
It is unlikely at this point that Mike Johnson will be Speaker on the first round as we spend time with Lisa Camuso Miller. Lisa, what happens to the Tom Massey's, Ralph Normans of the conference, assuming Mike Johnson does become Speaker? Are they on the outs, having crossed Donald Trump on the outs with this incoming White House?
You know, it's hard to say, Joe. I mean, the way these districts work, they are so incredibly empowered, these members of Congress, as it relates to how they govern and how they speak up and out. So with this thin of a margin, with this narrow of a deciding line as it relates to the majority for the Republicans, it gives power to members that ordinarily would not have power. They will continue to have to be courted and wooed in order to vote in line with leadership, and that makes them incredibly powerful and probably makes them feel like they have even more to say than ordinarily they might in a much larger majority.
Even as Elon Musk and Donald Trump could threaten them with primary challenges as a result. Noteworthy that we are getting more and more, we're progressing further through this roll call, and we haven't had Donald Trump or Elon Musk chime in on social media. In fact, Elon Musk on the X, the platform that he owns, is actually more interested in commentating on politics in the UK right now than what's going on in the US, or Germany. But if Mike Johnson goes down on round 1, perhaps we will see these voices added, keeping in mind, Lisa, that Tom Massey, Ralph Norman too, I believe, and Chip Roy, none of them were initially for Donald Trump in the Republican presidential primary. Roy and Massey were backing Ron DeSantis. Ralph Norman was for Nikki Haley, who of course was at one time governor of the state that he represents. And so I do wonder if they even really care what Donald Trump thinks, as they have not always been for him, and they've been out there publicly with that.
Well, they're asserting their own independence inside the party, which, by the way, is the way that the process has always worked, except that now they're incredibly empowered by the fact that there are so few votes to be lost, right? And so perhaps Norman doesn't necessarily care. Perhaps he's not worried about his primary in 2 years. Perhaps he knows that there's a lot of time between now and then, and it's not really going to matter. There's so many things at play here. But the one thing that was mentioned on the earlier panel that I think is incredibly relevant is the fact that the demonstration of control and the demonstration of being able to deliver this vote is the earliest indication of how things are going to go for 2025 and going forward. And so the sooner the party gets this right, the sooner the speaker is elected, the sooner they can get to work and they can start to put some points on the board. So this alone is a distraction, and one that really needs to be settled very quickly in order for them to get to work on something that is crystal clear from the voters' point of view, is that Congress needs to work for them.
As we spend time with Lisa Camuso Miller, Chip Roy's name just came up. Kaylee, he didn't make a peep. This is another member of the Freedom Caucus, a Republican, deciding not to weigh in, at least yet. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. We're going to experience this live together when they come back around and ask these 6 members now who they are voting for, with 4 candidates on the board. Did we just get another?
We did. Congressman Keith Self has just voted for Byron Donalds.
We got 5 on the board.
So we now have another candidate. Jim Jordan, Byron Donalds, Tom Emmer, all have received votes in addition to the many more votes for Hakeem Jeffries and Mike Johnson. But with 3, it's basically impossible to see how Mike Johnson is going to be able to get to 218 on this round. It would require Democrats to flip. And at this point, there is no indication that that will happen.
Yeah, this is really something. It appears we are going to have a second round. Whether that happens immediately at the conclusion of this first ballot, we'll find out together as we spend time not only with Lisa, but our signature panel. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are watching and listening along with us here. Rick, our Republican strategist, what do you think of the most recent updates here? We've got now 5 candidates on the board, 6 holdouts. Rick, I guess this is going to take a while.
Yeah, we're going to, regardless of what else happens, I think the math isn't achievable at this point for Johnson. And so you're going to wind up probably having another ballot. The real question is, are they going to take a break and go into a caucus and have Johnson speak to his caucus? You know, it's interesting that it's not close. This will like now allow other members to say, okay, now that it's broke, I can do whatever I want to do to achieve my political means at home and show my independence. So I wouldn't be surprised that we have more people putting other names into the cycle, but certainly more, you know, maybe withholding their vote till the end. But with 3 names in nomination, in addition to Johnson out of the Republican side, it not only looks disorganized, but it's a real referendum on Johnson not having the support he thought he had coming in. He said he was going to lose 1 vote, and he's now lost 3, and that's 3 and counting.
Well, that's a very fair point, Rick, as we still have 6 who have not voted, plus 3 who voted for other candidates. That could bring the total tally ultimately to 9 votes against Mike Johnson. That's a lot he has to whip in pretty short order, Jeannie, considering he had suggested he wanted to hold fast on the rules of the House that had been put forward, including having 9 members be the requirement for a motion to vacate to be brought against the Speaker. Do you see a world in which that number 9 has to come down?
Thompson of Mississippi.
It definitely has to come down. And, you know, one of the things that I think is so important is what you just mentioned, Kaylee, is that what is Donald Trump doing right now? Behind the scenes, I suppose he is fuming and he is on the phone and he is making promises and he is threatening whatever he needs to do. But the reality is he's truthing about Liz Cheney. And so he is not coming out and saying, you know, Mike Johnson deserves our support. You know, the worst case scenario here is not for Mike Johnson, is not what's happening on the floor. But imagine if Donald Trump comes out and says, hey, you know what? I'm not sticking with this guy. So Mike Johnson has a lot to think about here and a lot of whipping to do, because this drop off at 9, potentially more if it is probably a lot larger than anybody expected. And for anybody who thought this thing was going to be one and done, this is going rounds now, and there's going to be demands on the table from these people who are holding out, and those are going to have to be met to whip those votes.
So is it time to crack open this rules package, Rick? 36 pages. Mike Johnson said he didn't want to touch a point of punctuation, but it sounds like we might have some deal making to do still. What do you think?
Oh, for sure. Not just the rules package, but subcommittee and committee chairmanships potentially. We know Chip Roy had indicated that he would be willing to vote for Johnson if he got to be chairman of the Rules Committee. The problem with that is you give that job to him and you probably lose half of the Republican caucus who would oppose that. So there's a very narrow band of flexibility on this stuff. I mean, it's better to offer Chip Roy a ambassadorship to some Asian island somewhere and have a special election in that district than to give him a chairmanship of an important committee like this. So it's going to be a painful afternoon. I think what this indicates to us is all the negotiating and all the deal cutting didn't get done before the vote started. And I really don't understand that, because we saw this happen with McCarthy as if he was surprised by the opposition he had. And now we see it happening again with this speaker. I really wonder, don't they know how to count votes in this caucus? It's not a lost art. It's counting heads. And the idea that he would walk in today with potentially 9, if not more, votes in opposition to himself, and yet say he's only going to lose 1 vote. He had to know that he was going to look foolish in the process.
Well, to add the voice back in here of Lisa Camusa Miller, former RNC communications director, as we are nearing the end of the roll call list, they'll still have to come back around to call on those 6 individuals who have not yet voiced support for anyone as speaker. Lisa, do you think as we try to get inside the mind of Donald Trump, he might be having some regrets of pulling multiple Republican members of the House out to join his administration right now as he struggles with this math?
No, definitely not. I mean, I think, look, this is it. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but the truth is just this. It's going to happen. It's going to be Donald Trump. It's going to be Mike Johnson, and it's going to be messy. And that's exactly the way this year is going to be. It's a small, narrow margin. It was a small, narrow margin before he made those nominations. It's still going to be pretty narrow. It has a lot to do with the way the electoral map has been drawn, and these districts are so inherently R or D, is that this is the way it's going to go for a while. And so if you're Donald Trump, yeah, you're frustrated. I'm sure he wanted this to get done right away. If you're Mike Johnson, I'm sure you wanted to get this done right away. I mean, Rick's point could not be more on track in that, yes, I remember a time when we didn't go to the floor when we knew what the votes, before we knew what the votes were going to be. We're living in different times.
For what purpose does
Let's listen now.
The Virgin Islands seek recognition?
Live
Speaker,
from the House
I have
floor.
a parliamentary inquiry. I note that the names of the representatives from the Americas, Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and the District of Columbia were not called, representing collectively 4 million
This is not playing into,
Americans.
obviously, the way this is going to end here. We still need to hear votes, Kaylee, from the 6 holdouts in the Republican conference, and more specifically, the Freedom Caucus. With Mike Johnson, if you're just joining us on Bloomberg TV and radio, failing to get the votes in the first round to be the next speaker.
And actually, that number may, in fact, be 7, as Mike Waltz was called and did not answer. He, of course, has been tapped to join the administration.
Right.
One of the members that I was referring to, interestingly, to hear or to not hear from someone who could be part of Trump's administration, immediately voicing support for the candidate here that Trump has endorsed.
We're going to stick with this live until we come back around following the gentlelady's objections here. And of course, we'll carry you through all of the rounds of voting that are required to learn who the next speaker will be. This is happening before our eyes here, live in Washington.
As provided in section
They're now running
36
through the
of the
rules
House
here of
Rules
who
and
is in
Manual,
fact
the
allowed
Speaker
to
is
vote.
elected-
This is how the
elected by a
sausage is
majority of
made.
the
As we
members
spend
left
time with Lisa
voting by
Camuso
certain.
Miller. Lisa, a lot of pressure on these 6 members as the headline crosses the terminal. Johnson poised to be short of votes for speaker in the first round. We can say that
What was supposed to be temporary has
as a
now
point of fact.
effectively
Now, what happens to these 6 members who are standing in the back of the room, Lisa? Everybody wants a piece of them.
No question about it. And the one thing that we saw last time around is it really illuminated what happens on the floor of the House, right? You can see the machinations. You can see the negotiating happening from the start. I'm curious to see what they have to say. I'm curious to see what those voices are. You saw that Chip Roy, who has an interest in being rules chair, held back on what his vote was going to be. That's one I'm curious to see how and when his vote changes, if it does at all. There's a lot of moving parts here, and it's one that I'm continuing to watch just historically. It's to me, this is I'm kind of a sicko, if you will. I kind of love this stuff. And I do, like I said, I ultimately think Mike Johnson's gonna get it, but it's gonna be a show to watch for a little while longer.
Yeah, and we're about to find out more as they're going back to read the names of those who have not yet voted. Let's listen in.
Carson. Jeffries. Cloud. Johnson. Clyde. Clyde.
Still nothing on Representative Clyde.
Gosar.
Some are still choosing not to vote, Kaylee.
Yeah, 2 of them, though Andy Biggs did vote
Harris
for Johnson.
of
He was the
Maryland.
first name read.
Johnson.
That's the chair of the House Freedom Caucus.
Roy. Johnson.
How about that?
Chip Roy.
Okay, that was a
For
big one we
Mike
were waiting for.
Johnson.
We might be getting closer to home here in regard to a second round.
Waltz. Johnson.
This is live sound and video from the House of Representatives on Bloomberg TV and radio. We just went through the remaining names. Kaylee, let's see how the math stands as we keep our eyes locked on the speaker's roster.
If there are any representatives-elect who did not answer the call of the roll, they may come to the well and vote at this time.
Keeping in mind, there are still 2 who have not voted. Congressman Clyde and Gosar had not yet voted. It seems they may read their
Clyde.
names out again. Let's listen.
Clyde.
Johnson. No?
Gosar. Johnson.
We should mention we're waiting for a final tally here. Mike Johnson, it appears,
Clyde.
does not have the votes on this first round.
And with that, every member who did not vote on the first round did ultimately decide to vote for Mike Johnson as Speaker. That said, those final names will not be enough to get him over the finish line, it seems, on this first round, as 3 other members of the Republican conference voted for other candidates. Tom Emmer, Jim Jordan, and Byron Donald, each receiving a vote in this round. The question is going to become round 2, and whether those 3 members, any of them, will change their minds. Obviously, Tom Massey, who voted for Tom Emmer, has been pretty clear that he will remain a no vote.
That's right.
No vote on Johnson.
No
So
matter how
Johnson's
many
going to be
rounds we
looking to
have.
these other 2.
That's fair to say. There are indications, Kaylee, that we could have a break here. It's unclear exactly procedurally what is going to happen next. They could choose to go directly into a second ballot. They could also take a break, and there are some members who are planning news conferences at the conclusion of this vote. So I suspect that we will stop down for a moment here. Lisa Camuso-Miller, what's your expectation now that Mike Johnson has failed to win the gavel on the first round?
I mean, the truth is that there's still negotiating happening on the floor right now. And a lot of times things happen right there, right? So they just have a couple to get over the line. The fact that all of those that held out, that said nothing on the first round, came around to Johnson, tells me that at least those 2 that we're waiting on are going to find a way to get right. There's too much pressure from all of the others that are with the speaker right now to see that change not happen. So to me, Massey stays a no, or stays the way he will, because that's what he's chosen to do, and he's been crystal clear about that. He's not negotiating on that. But the other 2, they could very well come around, and that to me is exactly what's going to happen. So I'm not convinced they're going to go to the sticks just yet. I'm convinced there may be some work left to be done on the floor, and they may try to do this one more time before.
Well, so as we consider the minds that would need to change here, Ralph Norman and Keith Self, what do you think it is that Johnson needs to promise them, Lisa, to get this done? We knew the big ask was from Chip Roy to be chair of the Rules Committee, and yet Roy already just threw Johnson his support after a little delay.
Yeah, but even Chip Roy has said that that's not contingent on his vote for Mike Johnson being the chair of the Rules Committee. And that, to me, that tells us everything we need to know. And so regardless of what those other two need, Mike Johnson has been clear. He has said it again today. He is not going to make concessions like like Kevin McCarthy did, which ultimately was the undoing of Kevin McCarthy. So Johnson is taking a different tack here. I suspect that it's going to be something relative to the way that the administration at least sort of leans in, or the way that that House leadership leans in. And perhaps maybe it's the two people that those guys voted for in the first place that come to them and say, step in line, don't vote for me. Byron Donalds was with Mike Johnson, and so was Jim Jordan. So, I mean, those two guys potentially could be the movers on making those votes go the right way.
There seems to be some confusion here among the clerks. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, they are busy going back over their math right now in the speaker's rostrum. I'm not sure what comes of that other than a formal number at this point. Rick Davis, if you're Mike Johnson, do you want anyone to leave the floor, or you want to lock him in the room?
Yeah, I think you got to lock him in a room. Time is not his friend. Just looking at some of the body language going on with his leadership sitting there, I think they were expecting a better outcome than this. They look surprised. Certainly Speaker Johnson looks, I would say, unprepared for what was happening on the floor. So I think that he's going to want to try and keep people seated, get his whips to coalesce with the no votes, folks who endorsed other candidates, and try to reload this as quickly as he can. The last thing he wants is people getting on the phones and starting to whip up, an opposition to him. Right now, he's got his strongest foot planted on the floor of the House, and he shouldn't let anybody leave.
We're still waiting on the final gavel here in the ultimate tally, but again, it does appear that Mike Johnson will have fallen short of the 218 votes it would have required to secure the gavel for Speaker of the House, in spite of the fact that he was the endorsed candidate by President-elect Donald Trump. And Jeannie, as we've already mentioned, Donald Trump doesn't seem to be, at least publicly on Truth Social, paying too much attention to these proceedings, having posted previously about Liz Cheney getting a medal from President Biden yesterday, then just posted about Democrats being giddy about the American flag potentially being at half-mast during his inauguration. Doesn't seem like he's too bothered by what's going on. Is it his voice that needs to chime in here to make the difference on round two?
Oh, I bet he is chiming in big time, bigly, Kaylee, behind the scenes. He is on the phone. He is working those phones. I think we will see those two ultimately move over. I have no doubt of that, whether it's on the next round, which I suspect, or a round after. He is obviously trying to tell the American public, because listen, markets move, as you know, over these things. I mean, this is not a good day in Washington. It is no way to transition into a new administration. So he doesn't want to make more public hay of it than needs be, but he has got to be fuming as to how this has gone over so far. And he is hoping to just say, no need to look over here, keep moving. Look at those bad Democrats, see what they're talking about the flag and giving awards to Liz Cheney. But of course, all eyes are on Congress. And as much as he and Elon Musk try to divert attention, this has not been a good day for the Republicans. They won Washington, D.C. They own it, and they need to show the American people they can govern. And this is certainly no way to start that process.
Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis, our signature panel, with us with a live view of the floor of the House of Representatives. Mike Johnson not clearing the first round. He does not have the votes in the first ballot today to be the Speaker of the House in the 119th Congress. We will advance to a second round at some point. And it's a pleasure to add the voice of Mark Molinaro to our conversation today. The former congressman, as of about 2 hours ago, Kaylee, from New York, is with us on Bloomberg TV and radio. Congressman, welcome. It's great to see you and good to have you with us here. And I guess your post-congressional career, they've already updated your Wikipedia, sir. I don't know if you noticed that, but everyone should realize that before this process began today, the 118th Congress was officially ended. Are you glad to not be part of this process right now, Congressman? What's going on?
No, I readily admit I'd much rather be there representing the people of my district. Although it is a little bit of deja vu, right? We new members 2 years ago sat and waited, for those 13, 14 votes to ultimately secure Kevin McCarthy the speakership. I think this gets resolved personally in the next round. I think that some of my former colleagues are withholding votes out of principle. Thomas Massie is stubbornly principled and principally stubborn. And so I don't know that his vote's going to change, but I think a couple of my other colleagues or former colleagues, are sounding the alarm. They have some concerns, but I think they come along and Mike Johnson pulls out the win, hopefully, I'd expect and think in the second round.
Well, when we consider, sir, the people your former colleagues who didn't vote for Mike Johnson voted for, Byron Donalds, Tom Emmer, Jim Jordan, do you see any of them as really standing a chance if for some reason they prove unbudgeable and Mike Johnson simply can't get to the requisite votes?
Mike Johnson is the only member of the House Republican Conference that can get to 218 votes, frankly, has the support of President Trump, and is the right person to lead the conference and to lead the House, along with Senator Thune in the Senate, to advance President Trump's agenda. I think they get there. It's likely they get there. I have a great deal of affection and admiration for Byron and certainly Tom Emmer. But again, Mike Johnson has proven his ability to navigate an independent group of people. It's just the way it is. I heard the previous comments. Yes, we would much prefer. I certainly know the president and others to have this behind us, one vote. But the truth is the House Republicans are very connected to their districts, very reactive and responsive to their constituents, and are independent thinkers. It's just the way the body works. And, Mike will get there, but sadly, it'll likely it's certainly going to take another round.
I know you expect to see this on the second round, and that would be important for Mike Johnson. But what's really going on here, Congressman? Is this a big PR move? We're raising money, or are there legitimate objections to the way Mike Johnson comports himself as Speaker?
Listen, as I said, Thomas Massie is principled, and he's stubborn, and he's principled. And so his objections are based on things that he sees are value. The process needs to be different. Individual appropriations bills committed to, but keep and an open, much more transparent and communicative process. But, I've served as an executive and a legislator. The Speaker of the House is kind of like an executive, although obviously not entirely. Legislators always want more time and more information. And when we give them more time and more information, they want more time and more information. And so I would just, let me just say quickly, the others, I don't think they're interested in raising money off of this. I think they have reasonable objections. Yeah. I don't agree that they should be withholding votes. I think they moved Mike pretty far along, and Mike Johnson's exactly the kind of personality and person to navigate and to get consensus among these members.
Well, Congressman, as you talk about a desire for more time, it doesn't seem that there will be much time given to members after that first round of voting, though it still has been gavelled out. We don't have the final tally officially. A whip notice, according to our reporters on Capitol Hill, just went out for House Democrats, that members are being told to return to the floor for the second roll call to begin, although we're watching now in real time as Mike Johnson walks off the House floor. So it's not really clear, sir, what's going on at this time. What we do know, though, is the difficulties. Sorry, please go ahead.
No, listen, I lived through this 2 years ago. We went through multiple votes, didn't leave the floor, as you recall, but there's a great deal of negotiation still going on. Again, is it necessary? No. President Trump has endorsed Mike Johnson. Mike is the right person to mold that consensus among these members, and I think they need to really give him that benefit, certainly of the doubt. But there's still negotiation going on. People are still talking about what are the steps necessary to curry and to earn those last few votes. But I don't think Thomas Massie changes his vote. I think the other members ultimately will come along. But again, they're playing a dangerous game. The president has been elected with an agenda and a mandate, like it or not. This is a change election, and he comes into office with a great deal of goodwill. And these members are really risking that. And again, Mike is the right personality and the right capacity as a conservative leader to mold the consensus in that conference to move President Trump's agenda.
Well, we're preparing here, it seems, for a second round. I don't know how long it's going to take to come together. But you look at the folks who did not vote for Mike Johnson, Congressman Ralph Norman is one I'm looking at specifically. And there was, by the way, we witnessed Nancy Mace hand her cell phone to him a short time ago, wondering who might be on the other end of that phone. You can use your imagination. Would he be terribly difficult?
It wasn't me, but I suspect it was somebody with more influence.
Maybe Mar-a-Lago calling?
Maybe. No, I think that's
possible to flip Ralph Norman on a second round?
Yes. Yeah. And again, because I think Ralph's objections are less substantive. Listen, some of the members very much want, strong commitments on process and order. And again, it's hard to have delivered that, and they're holding him accountable for being Mike Johnson for being thrust in with no infrastructure to begin. Mike's done a remarkably good job as a brand new Speaker of the House. I mean, truly new in every capacity, and in a bifurcated bipartisan government. He just couldn't force the president and Senate Democrats to agree. With President Trump and now Senator Thune and the majority in the Senate, they're just holding him to a standard that, frankly, will change in a matter of weeks. On January 20th, it is simply our party. And that dynamic will play out with President Trump leading the agenda. And again, I think that somebody like Ralph Norman understands that and will likely come along. Again, I think I've said it clearly. I don't expect Thomas Massey to, but I think the others will. I just think they're holding Mike to a standard that couldn't have been achieved certainly over the last 6 months, but very well can be achieved with a unified government.
And yet, as we see evidence today, sir, he will be dealing with an incredibly thin majority in which he has very few votes that he can afford to lose, especially so initially before special elections can be held in states like yours, where Elise Stefanik, of course, has vacated her district in New York. And it begs the question, especially when we consider issues that I know are high profile in New York, like the future of tax policy and the SALT cap, how difficult it is going to be in a Republican conference so divided in many ways along fiscal lines, with some of these people who held out initially on this roll call really being focused on fiscal matters, how hard that's going to be to get that policy across the finish line, even with Republicans entirely in control of Washington.
Yeah, listen, there's a legitimate concern that within the House Republican majority, there's just so many different factions that cobbling together legislation becomes more complicated. But, to use SALT as an example, the SALT cap, listen, President Trump has said lifting the cap is something he now supports, sees honestly the value of revisiting. If he's leading that charge, I think there's certainly more of a capacity to do it, to achieve it. And then again, through reconciliation, what do they package together? Is this a single bill or two bills? Is it border and taxes? Is it separate? As these decisions get made, they're going to be made in the context of how do you cobble together 218 votes? Let me also say this. I mean, Democrats are not absolved from responsibility. Yeah, I get it on inside politics, like who's the speaker, you kind of camp out on your side. But on public policy, where the president gets elected, again, with a mandate. And there will be those who argue what is a mandate, a big majority or not, but he was elected with a mandate to change things. If Democrats withhold votes, they run the risk in certain parts of the country for their own sake. And so, frankly, there are going to be some Democrat votes on border security. There'll be some Democrat votes on tax reform and new tax policy that at the end cobbles together the votes. But your point is well taken. This is a conference with many factions that, frankly, is filled with independent thinkers. So cobbling together support is going to be more challenging. But again, that's why Mike Johnson is actually well suited. He doesn't lead with a heavy hand. He doesn't impose his will on you. His job will be to effectuate President Trump's agenda by molding consensus among stakeholders. And these holdouts really have to give Mike credit for his willingness and capacity to do it truly without, seeking revenge or punishment. And that's why I don't understand the holdout. But I think at the end of the day, they'll come along and Mike will be in a position to, again, mold that consensus around the policy that President Trump wants to move forward. The American people expect.
Well, we should note that this first round still has not gavelled. Assuming that there are still members who could change their votes, which might be happening right now. There's a bit of a delay in the process here, and we'll keep tabs on what happens for you here following the first attempt by Mike Johnson. By the way, he did leave the chamber, if you're just joining us, and he was shaking his head at one point. Kaylee, there's a little bit of chaos here breaking out. Tom Emmer, who received 1 vote, is still on the floor talking with members. Did you mention Elise Stefanik just now? I think you did.
I did in passing reference,
Congressman,
yes.
now that we have you, now that you're a free man, will you run to replace Elise Stefanik in New York's 21st Congressional District?
Well, I'm not going to make any news with you today, but I listen. Anything's on the table for me. I've said if the coach says you need to be on the field, I'll be on the field. I don't foresee that as likely. I love the part of the state I represented up until a few hours ago, and want to be very helpful in moving policy. But again, nothing's off the table, and things change quickly around here, don't they?
Apparently.
Oh, well, that's absolutely true. And if they change for you, sir, come back and break that news for us another time.
Yes,
Former Congressman Mark Molinaro of New York. We appreciate your time today, sir. Thank you so much for joining us again as we are awaiting the final gavel here on this first round of roll call voting for Speaker of the House as the 119th Congress gets underway. It was 218 votes required. It does not seem at this time that Mike Johnson was able to receive those, with 3 Republican defectors voting for other candidates. We're awaiting the beginning of round 2. Could begin any minute. We're looking for clarity here. We do need the gavel on the first round first, though, Joe.
That's right. He's a couple short. Some votes could still change. This is a fluid situation as we wait for the gavel to drop. And we want to get a quick comment from both members of our signature panel as we anticipate round 2. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us. Looking at a lot of serious faces on the floor right now, Rick. A lot of heads are shaking. People are having very serious conversations. Is it possible to turn people around at this point? Why not just go on to another ballot?
Well, I think they want to take some time to try and do exactly what you said, Joe, is turn some people around, make sure that they don't just waste another ballot. They don't want to walk down this trail and have exactly the same thing transpire. And remember, a lot of these people who chose not to vote initially, I think there were 7 total, if they had withheld their vote, they could have accidentally elected Hakeem Jeffries, the speaker. So it was as much, I think, a understanding that they had to vote for Johnson at that point in time just to make sure that the Democrats didn't wind up, having a day 1 coup on the floor of the House of Representatives. So, yeah, I think deals have got to get cut. They got to get cut quick.
Wow.
Well, I guess that raises the question, Jeannie. We're all assuming we're just looking for flips toward Johnson, but we very well could see flips away on round 2. Can't rule anything out at this time, can we?
We cannot. The reality is Rick is exactly right. They couldn't allow Hakeem Jeffries to become speaker. So at that point, they had to go with Johnson. But now we start a round 2 at some point in the near future. And it's, really anybody's ball game. Hopefully, Mike Johnson and his team have done a better job whipping this second vote than they did the first one. And, for all of Donald Trump's truthing about the Democrats, I assume he is on the phone whipping those votes as well, because they are going to need all hands on deck, because the longer this goes, the worse for the Republicans and Donald Trump. And I love former Representative Molinaro's positive take. Oh, they're independents. They're, doing the work of their constituents. We like to, ask questions, all that stuff. But the reality is this is bad for the Republican Party. And this thing doesn't get easier once we get a speaker. It gets tougher. And so, I think it is not, a moment in which the Republicans can feel very good about what they're inheriting at this point.
Well, Jeannie, we thank you. Rick, we thank you. We'll get back to you when we learn more. Our signature panel with a lot up in the air here still, having seen the first round of voting. And we do want to be clear, Kaylee, lawmakers could still change their votes on this first ballot until they do drop the gavel here. If and when that happens, we will move to a second round. It appears, based on the whip notice that went out to Democrats, that they will stay on the floor for this. So we could have news imminently here as Republicans try to figure their way forward.
Yeah, and until we get that final tally, we do have a rough idea of what the numbers are, and that is that every single Democrat who was present and voting did vote for Hakeem Jeffries. He got 215 votes, at least initially, on the roll call. Mike Johnson got just 216, with 3 members of the Republican conference voting for other candidates. 218 is the magic number. At least it was on round 1. We'll see how many members actually go to the floor for round two. The math here is incredibly important. You need 50% of the chamber plus one.
We did have a full quorum to start here, but not only Mike Johnson has left the floor, several members have as well. It's believed that he is conferring right now with some of those folks who voted otherwise, specifically Ralph Norman. That's the name we're watching. I suspect his phone is going to be ringing quite a bit in the next bit here. And of course, an in-person meeting with the Speaker of the House. We'll keep you posted on all of this. A lot more to follow here with live coverage from Washington here on Balance of Power. It's our opportunity now to kick things back to New York, where Tim and Carol are standing by for Bloomberg Business Week. How are we doing, guys?
We're doing okay. We take the baton from Joe and Kelly. Thank you both so much. Welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Tim Stanovic. As they say, it isn't over until it's over. Joe Matthew pointing out that with that vote for the U.S. Speaker, first round here, but lawmakers can still change their votes until the vote comes to an official end. You are looking, for those who are watching on YouTube television and on Bloomberg Originals, a live shot of the House floor as the voting is not quite yet over, but you can see a lot of conversations happening, Tim, behind the scenes.
Hey, because of Republicans' narrow majority in the House, House Speaker Mike Johnson can only afford to lose one Republican vote. 3 Republicans had already voted for other candidates with the vote ongoing. Several more did not cast votes, but Johnson appears now to fall short of the votes needed to win speakership.
All right, we're going to continue to monitor. It is certainly top of mind for us on this Friday, January 3rd, 2025. We're going to come back to the nation's capital over the next 60 minutes and more as we follow what happens. Again, you are watching Bloomberg Business Week on this Friday. We are keeping a watch, too, on markets, a little bit of a different trade that we've seen over the last 5 days, because we have seen both the S&P and NASDAQ 100 down for 5 days in a row. So we're going to get into the trade. We're going to talk about, Tim, what's going on with alcohol stocks, because they are certainly getting hammered.
Yeah, I think some would say a hangover for U.S. alcohol stocks following that news this morning and tough talk about possible warning labels from the U.S. Surgeon General.
We're also going to talk about President Biden saying no go for the U.S. Steel Nippon deal. Also, we're going to get into a thumbs up, if you would, when it comes to Tesla in particular. One analyst weighing in, although reducing his price target on the company. So a lot to come over the next 60 minutes.
All that and more in the next hour. First up, though, we're checking the day's trade and top business stories. Here's Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. Happy Friday to you both. Right to the numbers here with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ solidly in the green. We are on track for a losing week. S&P so far down 0.5% on the week. Today, however, very different story. Green across the board here with the S&P right now up 1.2%. The Dow up 0.8%. NASDAQ pushing higher by 1.7%. And the Russell 2000 index up now by 1.3%. The 10-year 4.58% with a 2-year at 4.26%. Gold down $16 the ounce, down 0.6%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 1.3% right now, $74.04 a barrel. Developing story at this hour, Getty Images Holdings said to be exploring a merger with rival Shutterstock. That according to people familiar with the matter. And the other major story out of Washington today, President Biden did block the $14.1 billion sale of U.S. Steel to Nippon Steel, killing a high-profile deal that sparked a political firestorm and tensions between the U.S. and Japan. Right now, U.S. Steel shares, they are down almost 6%. ADRs of Nippon Steel unchanged, $6.97. So again, recapping, the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all advancing. S&P right now up by 1.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Master, Tim Stanovic live here on Bloomberg Business Week. A headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal kind of feels like certainly fitting for this 2025. Microsoft spending $80 billion in AI data centers this year. We know last year, Tim, they were certainly getting involved with various utilities and energy companies when it comes to supporting the energy build-out, be it nuclear or otherwise, because they need energy to fuel AI.
Shares of Microsoft were higher before this news, continuing to be higher, about 1% right now to the upside. You know what is not higher today, Carol?
Alcohol stocks.
Alcohol stocks. They're just tumbling today. Earlier in Europe and then here in the U.S., although many off their lows. This after the U.S. Surgeon General outlined the direct link between alcohol consumption and heightened cancer risk and called for warning labels.
Yeah, it really got everybody's attention, and certainly those who trade those stocks in particular. In the U.S., stocks impacted include Constellation Brands, Molson Coors, Brown-Forman, and Boston Beer. Let's get into the potential longer-term implications for the industry, if there are any. For that, we are welcoming Bloomberg Intelligence consumer products analyst Duncan Fox, who's been on this story throughout the day, so it's getting a little bit late there over in the UK. He joins us from London. Duncan, good to have you here. It is not a done deal, but what would a warning label for alcohol sold specifically in the United States materially mean for the global alcohol industry?
Well, the US is by far and away the biggest market for all of the companies that I cover, bar, I think, Carlsberg. So it's a major deal. You're looking at sort of anywhere between 10 and probably up to around about 25-30% of sales coming from the US. So it does matter, and it came out of nowhere, to be honest. I don't think anybody was expecting this. So the only country I know that does have a cancer label is Korea, and ironically, I think alcohol sales or liquor sales went up after it was brought on in 2017, but I think that's a special case.
Okay. Well, that's something I wasn't expecting to hear you say, Duncan. Hey, I'm wondering about the change.
I wouldn't expect it either.
I'm wondering about the change in administration here, because it's one thing for the Surgeon General to release this, 2 years into a presidential administration, but just a few weeks before a new presidential administration is sworn in here in the U.S., what power does the Surgeon General actually have to implement this? And, is like a Robert F. Kennedy, who runs, HHS, going to go along with something like this? Who could run HHS? He would have to be confirmed, I should note.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I think you'll know better than I will what will happen with the administration. It's difficult to know, but I mean, he's put it forward. Everyone knows alcohol's bad for you, especially in quantity, so that's not a surprise. But if you put something like this on, I had to go back to look at the tobacco legislation, and the tobacco cancers all happened in 1950s, and the labelling came on in 1966, 2 years after the then Surgeon General said it did cause cancer and could prove it. So there's probably a fair way to go before it gets onto a label. I have absolutely no idea what President Trump will do, to be honest. I mean, we thought he'd probably do something with alcohol the last time, and he didn't. He didn't do anything with tobacco either. He didn't ban menthol cigarettes. So I really have no idea. But it wouldn't be good news if it is confirmed.
It's interesting, Duncan, and I was thinking a lot about, I remember covering certainly the tobacco settlements and the focus there, and a lot of it got into what they knew years before anything became public. Is there a similar scenario that could play out for the global alcohol industry of knowing things internally that they maybe didn't share with the general public?
It's always possible. I mean, if you read the Surgeon General's statement, he said obesity and therefore food was another one of my sectors would be liable too. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do know. There's a lot of restrictions and drink responsible labels already on most alcohol sold in the country. So one could say that they are telling people to be responsible already. That may be a get out, but there's always a chance that somebody, particularly in the US, a lawyer decides to go for them. And you only need one judge to sort of give some sort of award, and we could be in a state here where you get litigation coming through. I'm not aware that that's going to happen, but there's always a risk when you get lawyers involved, frankly.
Duncan, as you mentioned, a lot of people have known that alcohol isn't necessarily good for us. It comes at a time when, over the last few years, we've seen a rise, at least here in the U.S., of alcohol-free beer, alcohol-free wine. In fact, a little later on our program, we're speaking to the co-founder and CEO of Libby Wines. It's an alcohol-free wine company. How is this coinciding with changing habits of consumers around the world when it comes to drinking, and what's that doing to these alcohol companies?
Well, all the alcohol companies are now doing alcohol-free, which are not alcohol-free. Actually, there's probably a little bit in there, but the technology has improved dramatically. They're getting the enzymes right to make it actually a palatable drink. I'm old enough to remember the first.
We've sampled some, not so great.
Some.
Yeah, I would agree. Some are bad, but if you go back to when I was a kid in Caliber, which was another Guinness alcohol-free beer. That was awful. I mean, that was drain cleaner. So nowadays you can drink these things, and the youth of today, they want that option.
Yeah.
They want to have an alcohol-free. So, and the best thing certainly for brewers and spirits manufacturers, these products tend to be at a higher margin now. They're growing at circa 10% plus. They're low in terms of their overall value for the company. I mean, I think low alcohol is something like 1.8% of the global alcohol industry. So it's still very, very small. So it can grow very quickly.
All right.
But the companies have put a lot of money into that area, certainly in the beer and some of the spirits companies, so they can address consumer habits that are changing.
All right. Well, we're certainly going to keep an eye on it, as certainly we know you will. I'm going to watch for Constellation Brands. They report earnings January 10th, so I'm sure they're going to get a lot of questions on this. Bloomberg Intelligence Consumer Products analyst Duncan Fox joining us. All right. So we mentioned alcohol stocks, which sold off earlier in today's trade. They have definitely come off their lows of the session. One stock, though, that has pretty much gotten beaten up in a big way is U.S. Steel, down as much as 8% at its lows today, Tim, off the low, still trading more than 5% lower. President Biden blocked the $14.1 billion sale of U.S. Steel to Nippon Steel, killing a high-profile deal that we've talked about a lot over the past year or so that sparked a political firestorm and tensions between the United States and Japan. It's something we talked about to the lead up to the elections and post the elections.
Yeah, President Biden announcing his formal decision earlier today after the case was referred to him by a U.S. security review panel ahead of a deadline early next week. We've got with us a Bloomberg News metals and mining heavy machinery reporter, Joe Doe, who's been covering all the twists and turns of this deal. Joe, remind us, why is President Biden blocking this deal?
I think it boils down to he's seen himself as the most pro-union president of all time. He made it a cornerstone of his policy for the past 4 years. He made unions a cornerstone of how he won the 2020 election, the blue-collar workers across the states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And I think he felt he had to follow through on that obligation. He had the support of the union leadership for the United Steelworkers, who make up a substantial amount of the steelworkers at U.S. Steel, and so he followed through on the promises that he made to them.
All right. What I love about you, and you've been in our studio several times to explain kind of whether or not this deal was problematic to U.S. national security. You know, there's a lot of history we can go into, and if you can briefly touch on it. But is this deal, if it went through, a threat to U.S. national security?
I don't think I'm the one to make a call on that, but I think what we learned through this process, and the process being the National Security Panel, CFIUS, and how they determined that there was ultimately national security is that economic security is national security. They argued that there was a chance that somewhere down the line, Nippon Steel would close U.S. steel mills in the United States for reasons to help their bottom line or to help their investors. The board just decided it was no longer worth it. And by shutting down that steel capacity, it would mean there is no longer steel capacity needed by the Defense Department, infrastructure, and construction. The irony behind all of this, Carol, is that argument that CFIUS made is a direct pull from the Donald Trump Commerce Department under Wilbur Ross from 2018.
Joe, context here. $14.1 billion. We talk about a lot of money each day. This is not a lot of money in the scheme of what we talk about. I mean, Microsoft is going to spend $80 billion on CapEx for AI infrastructure this year. We just got that headline. Remind us where the U.S. steel industry is, how this deal falls into it, who its competition is, and what it is today.
It's a 100 to 120 million ton market in the United States. 65% of the steel that the United States consumes annually is made by the American steel companies. It is used in everything. It is ubiquitous. And honestly, because it is so massive in terms of volume and what needs to be shipped, you pretty much have to produce it domestically for it to make economic sense. That is why every major developed nation in the world tries to have some sort of steel industry. But like you said, when you just look at the raw numbers, it's not the tech industry. And I think that's where it's difficult, right, to have these discussions. It's like, well, wait a minute, it's just steel. We've outsourced so much of it over the years, and China's producing over 1 billion tons. But there are still some logistical reasons that you have to keep steel in the United States. Now, does that mean that CFIUS should have recommended to the President of the United States, we don't have an ultimate decision on this, it's up to you to kill it or to keep it?
Right.
I don't know, but
yeah,
that's where we stand today.
All right, good stuff, and always incredible perspective on understanding this industry and maybe why decisions are made here. Bloomberg News metals and mining heavy machinery reporter Joe Doe joining us on this Friday. Hey, listen, let's not forget a lot going on in the nation's capital as we speak. We have got Republican Mike Johnson appearing to have fallen short of re-election as U.S. House Speaker on this first round of voting. So kicking off the GOP's new era of unified U.S. government control with a public display of internal party division. Keep in mind, the new Congress coming into session today, everyone. But it's interesting to see, and we have yet to really hear from the President-elect Donald Trump, who has shown his support for Mike Johnson. So coming up, we are going to get a bit of an update. Let's take you, though, to the nation's capital. There's, for those who are watching, a lot of conversations happening on the floor of the U.S. House.
What do you think they're talking about?
Yeah, trying to figure out vote number 2. Could there be vote number 3?
Hopefully. Well, no hopes. I don't know. No hopes and dreams when it comes to this stuff.
Could be a long day. Everyone, we are going to get an update from the nation's capital. That's next on Bloomberg.
It's 2:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Microsoft plans to spend $80 billion this fiscal year building out data centers, underscoring the intense capital requirements of artificial intelligence. More than half of this projected spending through 2025 will be in the U.S. Microsoft shares right now up by 1.3%. Well, investors certainly buying the dip today after a volatile week. Today we have got the S&P up 75 now at 59.44, up by 1.3%. Right now on track for a losing week, but we are trading at the best level of the session. The Dow up 347 now, up 0.8%. And NASDAQ is up 338. That is a gain of 1.8%. 10-year 4.58%. The 2-year 4.26%. Gold is down 0.6% right now. The precious metal at 26.41 the ounce, and Bitcoin up 1.8%, closing in on 99,000 right now, 98,892 on Bitcoin. JetBlue Airways has been hit with a $2 million fine by the U.S. Department of Transportation for routinely delaying some flights and setting unrealistic schedules, a first-of-its-kind enforcement action. Again, recapping, stocks higher, S&P right now up by 1%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. We want to take you back to the nation's capital because U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson's political future is on the line as the new Congress convened earlier today. The House conducting its first order of business, electing a speaker. The first vote has been underway in the past hour and a half. Mike Johnson, though, Tim, so far does not seem to have the vote to be or continue to be the U.S. Speaker of the House. But we're going to keep monitoring it because apparently lawmakers can still change their votes until the vote comes to an end, and we're waiting for that official end to be called.
Republicans have skillfully used speaker votes to extract promises and execute revenge. They hold a 4-seat majority, giving Johnson just a scant margin for error. Bloomberg News team leader for Capital Influence team, Mike Dorning, joins us in our Washington, D.C. bureau. Okay, so it appears, Mike, one vote is down at this point. More to come. Walk us through how Johnson could pull this off, the type of stuff that happens behind the scenes after a vote such as this, and what we learned after that first round.
So the first round isn't actually over yet. They've held it open for, it's been more than a half an hour. It's about 40 minutes. And Speaker Johnson's in the back room, just off the cloakroom, just off the chamber floor. We're talking with some of the dissidents, and they're kind of doing these backroom attempts at deal making to see if they can't make a deal before they hold this vote open. And sometimes in Congress, they will just hold the vote open for hours while they work over dissidents. Right now, the House Freedom Caucus, a group of ultra-conservatives, wants more power. So they've been asking for something like making one of their members the chairman of a key committee that controls what legislation gets on the floor and what doesn't. And they're just back and forth trying to wheel and deal. They may gavel this one to a close and then start voting again, but it's this backroom deal making is in high dudgeon right now.
All right, and our understanding is that at one point, Mike Johnson did leave the floor of the House.
Yes.
He came back. I am so curious, man, to be a fly on the wall there. But I'm also wondering about where is the president-elect, Donald Trump, on all of this?
Well, he's publicly endorsed
right.
Johnson. He wished him good luck this morning, but he hasn't made this he hasn't really threatened, that we know of, any of the lawmakers who are dissidents. So we'll see where Trump maybe tries to intervene. That he might be, for all we know, calling some of these people now, or he might be waiting. But so far, he hasn't publicly used his chits on this.
What do we know about what the dissidents want right now? We're talking about Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky, Ralph Norman of South Carolina, Keith Self of Texas. They voted for Republicans other than Johnson. What do we know about what they want? What's the message they're trying to send?
They want less federal spending. They don't want deals with Democrats. They want a more fiscally conservative government. The problem is a lot of the things they want, they can't get Republicans who are in swing districts to go along with, so there aren't the votes there. So it's very hard for Speaker Johnson to deliver that because he has such a tiny majority. Right now, if he loses 2 votes, he can't win for Speaker, he can't get legislation passed. So anytime, then he's out of luck unless he makes a deal with some Democrats.
Is it also unrealistic for, just from a numbers perspective, for some Republicans not to actually want to work with Democrats, given that it's just the slimmest of majorities in the House of Representatives for Republicans right now? They have to work with Democrats to get anything done.
Yeah, it's pretty hard for them to get, especially since these people are on the right, the very far right side of the Republican Party. So they basically want stuff that even a lot of Republicans don't want. So it's very hard for them to deliver that without, getting Democratic support. So it's pretty unrealistic. But, you start off in politics with positions that are farther apart,
right,
and then maybe you move closer.
One last question, Mike. It's a Friday. We're heading into a weekend. Expectations, any insight that you're hearing in terms of whether or not we get this? Obviously, this first vote's still not officially over. We haven't seen the gavel come down. But any understanding of expectations of getting this done today or likely to go into the weekend? Just got about 20 seconds here.
I wouldn't, it's hard to know on that. It's basically when the two sides, each side makes enough concessions that they can win it over. Now, my guess is President-elect Trump is not going to stand for this going on so that it delays the certification of his election on Monday. P.S. It doesn't matter whether that gets certified Monday or January 19th, but I don't think Trump is going to want to have that delayed. So I see that as kind of a deadline there.
All right, so appreciate it. We know it's a busy day for all of you guys there in the nation's capital. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, waiting to see whether or not he continues in that position. Our thanks to Mike Dorning, team leader for the Capital Influence team at Bloomberg News, joining us from D.C.
All right, now to one stock on our radar among the biggest gainers today in the S&P 500. It's Tesla. It's up 6.7% right now. It's also, Carol, one of the companies on the annual Bloomberg Businessweek list of 50 companies to watch for a host of reasons, some good, some bad.
For Tesla, it's actually some good reasons. Our Bloomberg Intelligence team says keep an eye on it because of Tesla's plans to introduce a slew of fresh models this year, including a lower-priced car and major refresh for its best-selling Model Y, which will help expand its reach to new buyers. Garrett Nelson is a VP and senior equity analyst over at CFRA. He follows Tesla. He reiterated his buy rating on the stock. He did lower, though, his firm's 12-month price target by $30 to $530 a share. Garrett joining us from Richmond, Virginia. Garrett, good to have you here. We've been talking a lot about Tesla already in the new year. Shares jumped 62% last year, doubled the year before, nearly doubled from the U.S. election in November to mid-December, have pulled back, though, 17% since that top or recent top in mid-December. You still rated it a buy, but you cut your price target. Walk us through that.
Sure. Thanks for having me. We think Tesla has a lot of positive momentum heading into 2025. The big catalyst here, you talk about the 62% jump in the stock price. Almost all of those gains came following the election. So that was a big positive. Obviously, Elon Musk is going to have a place at the table in the administration. And, the Department of Transportation has said that one of their key priorities is going to be putting in place a federal framework for autonomous driving, and we think that's really the key to the Tesla story, and the market share opportunity longer term is with autonomous driving. So that was a big positive.
Give us numbers there, Garrett, and also give us an idea of where this technology contextually falls into place, especially compared with the other players out there, namely Waymo. How does Tesla do compared to Waymo, and how big of an opportunity is this for Tesla?
Well, we think Tesla is taking the right approach towards autonomous driving. They're using a much different technology than Waymo. Tesla's utilizing primarily cameras and AI for their autonomous driving, whereas Waymo is using LiDAR. Now, Elon Musk has famously said, LiDAR is a fool's errand. It's expensive and it doesn't work. So And we think, over time, Tesla has proven that it is taking the right approach. We think the market is recognizing that. And with each subsequent update of their full self-driving software, Tesla is making significant strides to achieving full autonomy. Now, as far as the market opportunity, we think globally it's about a $4 to $5 trillion opportunity. So,
hey, Garrett, we're going to break in for a
Tesla's
second. We need to go back to the House of Representatives because it does look like the floor of the House that there are some developments. You see House Speaker Mike Johnson getting a lot of hugs from members on the House floor for those who are listening on radio. So it looks like we are seeing 2 House Republicans change their vote back to Mike Johnson as Speaker, looking for some further details on that. So it looks like he was shy of 2 votes, and it looks like he's getting them again. It looks like a very different environment from just about 5-10 minutes ago.
Yeah, Ralph Norman of South Carolina and Keith Self of Texas voted earlier for Republicans other than Johnson, though they have switched their votes back to Mike Johnson as Speaker. So 218, Mike Johnson gets it.
I think it's just interesting. Just a moment ago, we're saying, all right, are we going to have to see a second or third vote? But nonetheless, it looks like things are done. We have yet to hear the gavel go down. I don't think we've heard that officially, but based on what we are seeing on the floor of the U.S. House, it does look like that Mike Johnson will indeed stay in that position here.
Let's bring back Joe Matthew. He's co-host of Bloomberg Balance of Power. He joins us from our Washington, D.C. bureau. He's been following this throughout the day today. Joe, what do we know about how members of Congress change their votes in situations like this? What gets promised to them as a result of switching their votes back to Speaker Johnson? How does this work?
Well, I'll just say up front, they have gavelled this first ballot, even though we knew that Mike Johnson originally did not have the votes. This is really interesting, guys, that they chose to keep everyone standing by and not go to a second round. They've actually managed to change minds in real time. What those promises were, what those deals are, we do not know yet. But Ralph Norman and Keith Self, to your point, have just approached the Speaker's rostrum. That's why they didn't gavel this out, to give them the opportunity, having met behind closed doors with Mike Johnson for some time there. They've since come back around. He has the votes. He's going to be the Speaker of the House in the 119th Congress. That's your breaking news. There was a 36-page rules package that was agreed to on Wednesday, guys, and that is really where the rub probably lies on where this actual deal was made, the way that the House of Representatives will function, the way legislation is brought to the floor, who will chair the committees. These are the types of things that they've been talking about in an effort to craft a deal. What they arrived at is unclear. One thing the Freedom Caucus was asking was that Chip Roy would be named chairman of the Rules Committee. It's unclear if that was in the mix or even on the table. This has all been done behind closed doors and in real time. When these lawmakers start to come off the floor, I suspect we'll learn a lot more about what just happened. But talk about some real-time arm twisting here. We're going to get an official tally now next as you hear the clerk drop the gavel.
And again, we are waiting for that comment, watching the House floor.
The
Here we go.
tellers agree in their tallies that the total number of votes cast is 434, of which the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana has received 218.
There it is. 218 on the first round. A visibly relieved Mike Johnson on the House floor. His conference giving him a standing ovation here, guys. This normally, I say normally, in Congress's past would not have been such a heavy lift or a sigh of relief in this case. It's typically a formality on the opening day of the new Congress.
Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 215.
And there's your Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, as expected. Democrats were unified in their vote today, as promised by the gentleman from New York. And so there we have it, 215, 218. The members have spoken.
Honorable Tom Emmer of the state of Minnesota has received 1.
The majority whip with one vote as Speaker, something he can always talk about at cocktail parties. And now the governing can begin, Tim and Carol. We got through the formalities. He can swear in the members now.
Listen, he's got to feel relief, no doubt about it. But Joe Matthew, I always wonder about politically, how this looks. Better that it didn't go to a second round or a third round. Nobody would argue that. But that he didn't get it easily without having to have some negotiating going on. What are the implications potentially of that? Or do we start governing next week and everybody forgets about it?
I don't know anybody will forget about any of this. Let's remember, he will have a majority. If Donald Trump gets the members he requested to join his administration, a majority of one. So when you see Mike Johnson talking to Hakeem Jeffries on the floor there, rest assured they're going to have to work together to make anything happen. The next step, of course, once we get through this swearing in the membership, they're going to have to craft out a plan, an agenda that will include border security and extending the Trump tax cuts. They're going to have to avoid a government shutdown. They're going to have to deal with raising the debt ceiling. Doing all of that with a majority of one is going to be very complicated for Mike Johnson, who is now making his way toward the Speaker's rostrum so he can reclaim the gavel. A lot of happy folks here. But to your point, I think, Carol, the hard part actually starts now.
Did this vote today send any sort of message about the power of Donald Trump? Mike Johnson is backed by Donald Trump, but not everybody in the party fell in line today.
Donald Trump and Elon Musk, Tim, they both late in the game endorsed Mike Johnson. We can argue that it might have helped him actually get this done on the first round, remembering that this had to happen today for the vote certification on Monday, the 6th of January, right? This is the next January 6th we're walking up on here. You need to have a Congress to do that. That's a joint session where that takes place in the very chamber that we're looking at now, and you'll see Kamala Harris preside over that vote certification. That was a point of leverage that Kevin McCarthy didn't have, that even Mike Johnson didn't have the last time around. And I suspect that Donald Trump was involved in those conversations today. We saw Nancy Mace hand her cell phone over to Ralph Norman at one point. Wonder who was on the line there and whether that was a Florida area code. That's the way this thing takes place now. That's the way it's done now. And what would normally be kind of a formality, you have to grind the gears a little bit when you have so few people on your side in this Republican conference.
I got to say, Joe, I want to go back to something earlier you said, and it's something that we have many conversations with folks around this table, investment experts, who are wondering exactly what a Trump White House, a second Trump White House, ultimately gets done. You talk about this slim majority that will be there on the House and the work that Mike Johnson will have to do to really reach across the aisle. It is indicative of maybe not everything, or not to the extremes in terms of the policies we heard from Donald Trump on the campaign trail, ultimately get carried out.
Well, that's true. I mean, remembering, of course, you've got a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican White House. If it's ever going to happen, it's now. But yes, the real argument will likely fall along the lines of this tax code reform. It's not just as simple anymore, right, as extending the Trump tax cuts. You have to add no taxes on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, mortgage interest. There were so many others involving auto loans and things that, never mind salt. We haven't mentioned salt yet. Can you get all of that into one bill? That's a tall order. So when you look at promises made on the campaign trail, you have to get into the granular and whether that's in fact possible here. We're looking at this live shot, by the way, of Chip Roy in the back of the chamber, along with some of his fellow members of the Freedom Caucus, who were, the troublemakers, if you will, in this case for Mike Johnson, even though he closed the deal on round one. But what we're going to see next is the Speaker in the rostrum, where he'll be introduced by Hakeem Jeffries and handed the gavel. And this is the moment that they wanted, right? They've got their family members, their kids are with them in some cases today. This is supposed to be a big rah-rah photo op for the conference, and they'll get to that eventually. Once we get, by the way, back to Washington and back to governing in a week or two, it's also the confirmation hearings that need to take place for Donald Trump's team. And those are not going to go very easily for the likes of Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr. So before we even get to writing legislation, Carol, there are going to be some bumps on the road for this Republican majority.
Is Thomas Massie one of those bumps on the road?
Well, boy, he sure was today, although, everyone saw it coming, so I feel like they just kind of factored him out. He's made very clear that he's not about to change his vote for Mike Johnson, no matter what he is promised. So I think it's some of the other members, the Chip Roys. Marjorie Taylor Greene was on the side of Mike Johnson in this case. Andy Biggs, some of those folks, Andy Ogles in the Freedom Caucus, who don't like the way Mike Johnson handles budgeting, the fact that he has worked with Democrats so far, they might be more the thorn in his side.
You know, all right, just to rehash, if you're just joining us on radio, TV, across our platforms, Republican Mike Johnson winning re-election as House Speaker, overcoming resistance from a small but pivotal group of conservative hardliners after a flurry of last-minute talks and with the help of a critical endorsement from President-elect Donald Trump. You know, Joe, you understand the workings of Washington and what goes in and around the nation's capital so well. It will be an interesting second term of Donald Trump, and most already say it's going to be different from the first White House. I am curious, if you were sitting down, though, with the speaker, what would be your first question to him?
Boy, you know, how often do you guys talk? Because a lot of people think Donald Trump is the real speaker. And you've got arguably Donald Trump on one shoulder and Elon Musk on the other. So this is really, framed by many, the hardest job in Washington, or at least the most unwanted job in Washington, is being the Speaker of the House with such a narrow majority. I guess I'd ask him, to what extent are you willing to work with Hakeem Jeffries as well? Because they're going to need each other to do anything in this case. It's not so much a power-sharing agreement in the traditional sense when you'd have a real tie. But with one member, my goodness, they're going to have to work together on a lot of things here. And that's going to make life more challenging for Mike Johnson. The question is, again, how quick can they get to the border? That's what people want to see, those who brought Donald Trump back to Washington. And that will likely be the first bill that you see emerge.
How tenuous is Speaker Johnson's position right now? I think back to the challenges that former House Speaker McCarthy faced just a couple of years ago. Before this, how tenuous is his position right now?
It's less tenuous simply by the math. Tim, they're going to be voting on a rules package that I referred to already here. That's one of the next procedural things that will take place. That changes that motion to vacate. We kept talking about the procedure through which you fire the speaker. When it was Kevin McCarthy, he made a deal to get that gavel by bringing it down to a single member. That's partly why Matt Gaetz is famous at this point, because he took care of that, no longer in the House. And by the way, he didn't show up today, as some thought he might. That number increased to 9 now. It would take 9 members to trigger a vote to fire the speaker. So you've got a little bit of breathing room for Mike Johnson procedurally, but also politically, because he's got Donald Trump at his back. He's got Elon Musk behind him, and will likely be in much better shape in this Congress than anything we saw in the last.
I will say that we do have members of the House weighing in. Representative Scott Perry from Pennsylvania say, while I maintain my reservations about Speaker Johnson's leadership record, today I voted in support of President Trump's agenda. We will hold Speaker Johnson accountable to accomplish the Republican agenda. And talking about specific issues, he must secure our southern border, institute, commence House rules, cut unbridled federal spending, implement a congressional stock trade ban. So, you know, various members weighing in maybe on some of their concerns, Joe, and I would assume that we'll continue to hear some of these about what they expect out of this speaker.
Yes, sure, you will. And that's an important one that you mentioned, by the way, not by accident, because that is a member of the Freedom Caucus who has been on the fence with some of this, not so much about the Trump agenda. These are MAGA loyalists, but they are not always in favor of the way that Mike Johnson, or before him, Kevin McCarthy, has worked with Democrats. Continuing resolutions, omnibus bills. They want regular order, and they want steep spending cuts. And by the way, I've mentioned Elon Musk a couple of times. Right before this vote, Mike Johnson went on X and put quite a missive and said, as Speaker, I commit to do the following. There were 3 items. The very first one was to commit to working with DOGE and to enact the spending cut recommendations that come from Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. It may have helped him win the gavel today.
All right, Joe, do not go anywhere, because we need you at this hour, no doubt about that. I just want to remind everybody, we're watching the markets. We've got about an hour and 15 minutes to go. We've got stocks pretty much at their highs of the session while all of this is going on in the nation's capital. Some would say good to see this not go on longer. Investors certainly like decisiveness and decisions to be made. So just wanted to point that out. In the meantime, we do have somebody up there on Capitol Hill, our own Tyler Kendall. She's Bloomberg News reporter. Tyler, what I am interested in what you are picking up in terms of mood and maybe what was going on behind the scenes when Mike Johnson didn't initially get that vote and had to do some work behind the scenes.
Yeah, hey, Carol. It was fast moving up here on Capitol Hill. And just to give you a little bit of color of what's happening up here, the Hill is absolutely packed, both with members, but also their families as they come to witness the new member class be sworn in. So there is high energy here in the Rotunda. I can tell you that I was staking out House Speaker Mike Johnson's office earlier today before the vote, where he told reporters that he would not engage in what he called a quid pro quo to get any votes over the finish line. So that's going to be the next big question here, as Joe was talking about. What were those backroom deals that may have been reached in order to ultimately get him to that magic number of 218?
As Joe mentioned, the challenging part comes now, Tyler. What does Mike Johnson have to do to be able to actually be effective as House Speaker with such a slight majority?
Right, so I had reporting this morning that I had spoken to a congressional aide who told me that they ultimately thought that this was going to come down to potential spending cuts, some sort of deal around that. Since when you looked at the members who were voicing concerns with Johnson, they were the same members who have previously voiced concerns when it comes to potentially Donald Trump's agenda and what that means for the fiscal outlook for the country, particularly anticipated tax cuts. So I think that's going to see something that we really see prioritized in this next Congress, particularly with Speaker Johnson. Joe had also mentioned this, but right before he went on the floor, he put out what he was calling his list of commitments to his conference. And they really had to deal with this idea of fiscal responsibility, such as working with DOJ and appointing independent experts that will release a report to the public, but also urging his committees that they have to take what he called, quote, aggressive action when it came to reviewing their appropriations, because we are expecting a busy year, particularly with President-elect Trump's new agenda, and it's going to include spending and it's going to include tax cuts. And this was just a little bit of a preview for some of the criticism and thorns in the side of Speaker Johnson that we might expect.
Tyler, I've got to say, I've been watching and monitoring to see if the president-elect has made any comments on Truth Social, and just kind of watching to see if he makes any comments. What, if anything, did you hear about behind the scenes of any involvement of the president-elect in this process, especially since when it seemed like it was a little bit touch and go here at the end?
Well, I have to say there was actually an audible gasp here in the Rotunda when Chip Roy ended up going for President-elect Trump. We know that Chip Roy had been one of those holdouts, and he had previously sparred with President-elect Trump. If you'll recall, during that spending debate last month, when Trump had urged Republicans to lift the debt ceiling, he threatened Roy with a primary challenge, since Roy stood up and said that he was not going to end up voting for that. So it was interesting to hear that when President-elect Trump threw his weight behind Johnson, he offered to personally call members, and that included Chip Roy. And on the first round, of course, Chip Roy ended up going for Mike Johnson. So it does appear that there was some sort of sway there. And we are also told that allies of Trump on the Hill ended up going into trying to push and work with Speaker Mike Johnson when it came to persuading some of these House Freedom Caucus members. But ultimately important to remember that on that first round vote, Chip Roy and also the chair of the House Freedom Caucus, Andy Harris, both voted in favor of Johnson.
Tyler Kendall, Bloomberg News reporter, joining us live from Capitol Hill. Thanks so much for that. I do want to go back to Joe Matthew, standing by in our Washington, D.C. bureau, co-host of Bloomberg Balance of Power. Excuse me, Joe. So many shows out there. I want to go back to what you said about DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and the commitment on the Department of Government Efficiency from the elected Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. And hear a little bit about your view on how this could be easier said than done, given how much the U.S. government spends on Social Security, Medicare, national defense, health, even net interest. Yep. I mean, that's the majority of the budget right there. How does the Speaker enact the recommendations from DOGE?
It's a great question, and I'll preface my answer by saying that this DOGE, the D for department, is not actually a government department, right? This is kind of a blue ribbon panel, if you will, not unlike other committees that have been put together before. So we've been trying to determine where's the connective tissue here between the DOGE and the actual lawmaking when it comes to writing legislation or crafting budgets. He wrote in his post on X, "I commit to create a working group comprised of independent experts, not corrupted by lobbyists and special interests, to work with DOGE and our committees on implementing recommended government and spending reforms to protect the American taxpayer." There's no guarantee there that actually happens, though, and we don't exactly know yet what the DOGE plans to do in terms of cutting spending. We've heard Elon Musk suggest cutting $2 trillion, but I think to your point, Tim, they'd have to probably crack into entitlements to find that kind of money. They would have to slash defense spending, neither of which Donald Trump wants to do.
Yeah, I've heard that called the third rail of politics. People don't necessarily want to touch that. Joe. All right, Joe, thanks so much.
Said that right.
Yeah, Joe, thanks so much. We're going to let you go. You got a lot of work to do before your 5 p.m. show, so we're going to let you go. That's Bloomberg's Joe Matthew down there in Washington, D.C.
All right, we're going to stay in D.C., head back to our Bloomberg News Bureau. Bloomberg News politics editor Laura Davison has also been monitoring all of this. Laura, give us your thoughts here on these developments and the vote of U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson keeping his job.
Well, given how things were looking, just about an hour ago, this is a pretty big win for Johnson. He was able to, just take these members who were some of these holdouts off the floor into this little ante room just off the House chamber, talk with them for just a couple mere minutes and had them come out, change their vote, and was able to clinch the speakership. This doesn't bode excellently for going forward. They, for a lot of the things that the House will need to do, they will need to have a majority. They only have a very slim majority. So these are the kind of negotiations that we're going to see playing out when it comes to tax cuts, when it comes to immigration, and when it comes to this big wide agenda that Republicans have talked a big game about. Now the rubber actually meets the road, and they're going to have to convince everyone from the most conservative hardliner member of the Freedom Caucus to some of these moderate members who come from New York City area, Los Angeles area, and are not into really a lot of the same issues.
Our own Jack Fitzpatrick saying that Speaker Johnson told reporters that he didn't change any position in order to get the final votes. He said, quote, "We have a unified Republican conference." How do you do that? How do you get someone to switch their vote without making some sort of concession?
This is, what reporters in the hallway are trying to figure out right now. When McCarthy faced the same battle just 2 years ago, he gave up a lot of his power. He basically, had this rule that any one member could call for his ouster. That ultimately came to pass. That rule is no longer in effect. It's a broader section of members that need to come forward to oust Johnson if they are unhappy with him. There was a lot of discussions about this group called the House Rules Committee, and this is basically this procedural committee within the House that determines, when and how and where legislation moves. Ralph Norman, who is one of those holdouts who was at the very end, he is a member of that committee. There's always been a long desire for conservatives to have more power and more representation there. Johnson says he didn't give them anything, but there's a lot of questions about if he has a little bit more leeway.
Laura, we've got the 119th Congress convening for the first time. House Speaker Mike Johnson narrowly being reelected to his post. I'm looking at the podium right now, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York getting ready to basically hand him the gavel, and again confirming House Speaker Mike Johnson in that position. But we've seen supporters of Mike Johnson as he makes his way up to the dais, if you will, and up to the front of the room, really getting ready to make some comments and acknowledge him being once again House Speaker. But again, just watching some of the progress, but a lot of hugs, if you will, and congratulatory, you could see actions on the House floor. Let's listen to Hakeem Jeffries,
Speaker
Minority Leader.
Emerita Pelosi, it's great to see you back in the chamber. Whip Clark, Chairman Aguilar, thank you for your kind and generous words of nomination. To my colleagues in government, new members of Congress, families, friends, all those assembled. It's a high honor and a distinct privilege to welcome you to the People's House and the 119th Congress. The Bible teaches us in Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, 1st verse, that for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. It's fair to say that in a democracy, there's a time to campaign and a time to govern. The election is over. This is a new Congress. The American people need us as their elected representatives in this season to put down our partisan swords and pick up bipartisan plowshares. It's time for us to come together, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans, to get things done for the people. In that spirit, House Democrats will work hard to find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues in the incoming administration on any issue, whenever and wherever possible, in order to make life better for everyday Americans. For far too long in this country, the cost of living has gone up, but the size of the middle class has come down. Housing costs are too high. Grocery costs are too high. Childcare costs are too high. Insurance costs are too high. Utility costs are too high. America is too expensive. There are far too many people in this great country who for decades have been struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. That is not acceptable in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We need to build an affordable economy for hard-working American taxpayers, and we need to build it now. It's time for us to come together and finally lower the high cost of living in the United States of America once and for all. And we will work with anyone of any party to get that done. We will work with anyone to secure our borders, and we will work with anyone to fix our broken immigration system in a comprehensive and bipartisan manner. At the same period of time, we will push back against far-right extremism whenever necessary. So let me be clear. Social Security and Medicare are not entitlement programs. They are earned benefits. Hard-working American taxpayers pay in to Social Security and Medicare every day, every week, every month, every year throughout their entire adult life. They've earned those benefits, worked hard for those benefits, and deserve those benefits. So as Democrats, our promise to the American people is that we will fight hard to make sure that no one in this town takes away Social Security or Medicare from the American people. Not now, not ever, no means never. Our position is that it is not acceptable to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, cut Medicaid, cut veterans' benefits, or cut nutritional assistance from children and families in order to pay for massive tax breaks for billionaires and wealthy corporations. House Democrats will fight hard to protect working class Americans and the things that matter to them, not the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. Keep your hands off Social Security and Medicare. Over the last 4 years, it's been a great honor for us to work alongside President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, whose administration rescued the economy from a once-in-a-century pandemic, delivered historic infrastructure investments, created more than 15 million good-paying jobs, enacted common sense gun safety legislation for the first time in 30 years, provided life-sustaining health insurance to veterans suffering from toxic exposure, championed the largest investment in combating the climate crisis in the history of the world, which we will defend, and brought down the high price of life-saving prescription drugs for millions of Americans. Thank you, President Biden and Vice President Harris, for your powerful, principled, and purposeful public service. Thank you. Two months ago, the American people elected Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States of America. Thank you for that very generous applause. It's okay. There are no election deniers on our side of the aisle. You see, one should love America. One should love America when you win and when you lose. That's the patriotic thing to do, and that's the America that House Democrats will fight hard to preserve because we love this country. America is bigger than any one campaign, any one election, or any one individual. America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Let us never forget that our country is free, not simply because we are strong. America is strong because we are free. That freedom is now under assault. There are some in this country who apparently believe that the freedom of economic opportunity that made them wealthy should not apply to everyone else. Our message to that crowd is simple. Democrats will never abandon the long walk toward freedom. We will fight hard to defend the freedom of opportunity that makes the American dream possible. We will fight hard for the freedom to vote and to fight for a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We will fight for the freedom to organize and join a union of your choice. We will fight to defend the free enterprise system, but work hard to make sure that it actually works for working class Americans. And we will always defend a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. America promises one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's the America House Democrats will fight hard to preserve. God bless you. God bless the House of Representatives. May God continue to bless the United States of America.
All right, you've been listening to Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries. Getting ready to hand over the gavel, as is customary to do. Let's take you back there.
It is now my responsibility to present the gavel to the gentleman from the great state of Louisiana, the son of a firefighter, a God-fearing man, a husband, and a loving father of four, the 56th Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the Honorable Mike Johnson.
All right, everybody, of course, Hakeem Jeffries, and there he goes for those listening on radio, handing over the gavel to U.S. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, holding the gavel up and getting ready to make some comments, narrowly being reelected, we should point out, to his post as U.S. House Speaker. Opening up, getting ready to, as we said, make some comments here as he continues his term. We do also see on Truth Social some congratulations coming from the President-elect Donald Trump. let's take you back to the floor of the House of Representatives and Mike Johnson.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Leader Jeffries, all of our treasured colleagues here in the House. I'm grateful for this nomination. I'm grateful for this election, for the confidence this chamber has placed in me. It is the great honor of my life to serve this body with all of you. Of course, these are difficult days in our home state of Louisiana, where I come from. We all know about the terrorist attack in New Orleans, and it's really shaken our state. People are reeling from that attack. It took the lives of 14 innocent people, and it injured dozens more. And I wanted to begin appropriately today. If we could, I'd ask you all to join me in a moment of silence for the victims of this horrific act. Thank you. Thank you for that. I believe in giving honor where honor is due, and all of us do well to honor our spouses. My wife happens to be here this time. She didn't make it last time. It happened a little sudden. Kelly, would you stand up here in the gallery? Thank you. And we have our 4 children here, Hannah, Abby, Jack, and Will. We all stand up just really quickly. Come on. I wanted to do that. All of us recognize that there are no perks to being a congressman's kid, right? It's all sacrifice. And our spouses put up with so much, endless hours in travel and all the responsibilities upon us. And we're good to remind them how important they are to us and how we could not do the job without them. And so it's appropriate for all of us to do that. Thank you. Thank you, guys. This is a momentous time in the nation of the history of our nation. It really is. And as members of the 119th Congress, we are stewards of the great American Revolution that began almost exactly now 250 years ago, 1775 and 1776. It will fall at the time of this Congress, the great anniversary. And in these 2.5 centuries, we've been reminded repeatedly that freedom is never free. And we have stood tall as the greatest nation on the face of the earth. It is without debate. We are the freest, the most powerful, most benevolent nation that has ever been in the history of the world. And it's not by happenstance. We are the ones who settled the West. We are the ones who ended slavery, who laid the transcontinental railroad, who gave women the right to vote, who won 2 world wars, who landed on the moon, and who won the Cold War. Throughout our history, we have done what no one thought was possible. And still, at 250 years old, our nation is actually a young nation. This past fall, I had opportunity to go to the G7 speakers meeting that was held in Italy. It's the only international trip I took as speaker over the last 14 months because I didn't have time to do it, but it was a quick 3-day jaunt, and met with my colleagues, the speakers of the other parliaments, the great governments around the world. And we talked about that, how really special America is, how unique we are in our place on the globe, and how important it is for us to maintain that. And as I talked to these colleagues from around the world, I thought our closest allies, who recognize how important we are, how important this body, this House is. I thought about how is it that such a young country has become so exceptional, so singular in its importance, that today stands as the world's leader in liberty and the economy and culture. 100 years ago, President Calvin Coolidge answered that very question in his inaugural address. It was March of 100 years ago, exactly almost. He said this: "We best serve our own country and most successfully discharge our obligations to humanity by continuing to be openly and candidly, intensely and scrupulously American." I love that. I love that. Today, yeah, that's right. That's an applause line. Today, my friends, our nation is the envy of the world. Why? Because we have been marked by a spirit and a people who are explicitly that. We are explicitly American.
We don't try to be like other nations, and we recognize that a strong America is good for the entire world. And everybody around the globe knows that. That's right. We also recognize that the core principles that made America what we are must still be preserved today. The principles, I call them the 7 core principles of American conservatism, but it's really the 7 core principles of the nation itself. Individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, human dignity. These are the ingredients, the things that made us who we are. And in America, we know that human flourishing is best achieved by adherence to time-tested truths. We could list a number of those simple truths. Here's a couple. It's better to give a hand up than a hand out. That innovation thrives when bureaucracy dies. The simple truth that it is parents and families and not administrators that must be in charge of their children's education. The path of prosperity has long been paved with policies that put America and Americans first. And that is what we will champion in the 119th Congress. We have a mandate, and that was shown in the election cycle. The people want an America First agenda. They do. Sadly, for the past 4 years of divided government, too many politicians in Washington have done the opposite. Open borders and overregulation have destroyed our cities and stifled innovation. Inflation and weak leadership have left Americans poorer, and they have placed our country in a perilous position. That's right. But in recent months, we've witnessed something happening, something that's really remarkable, a political moment in our modern history, a groundswell of Americans from every state, race, and religion who now demand that we put the interest of Americans first again, and we will, and we will. This is a powerful new coalition of our country. It's a coalition that insists that we purge the policies of America last and we bury them in the graveyard of history's mistakes, because it was a big mistake. To that end, this Congress will renounce the status quo and we will listen to the voices of the people. We will act quickly and we will start by defending our nation's borders. That's the #1 priority. Yes. In coordination with President Trump, this Congress will give our border and immigration enforcement agents the resources that they need to do their job. We will secure the border, we will deport dangerous, criminal, illegal aliens, and finally finish building the border wall. You said you'd work with us on that, Hakeem. I'm counting on it. After 4 years of high inflation, we have a big agenda. We have a lot to do, and we can do it in a bipartisan fashion. We can fight high inflation, and we must. We'll give relief to Americans, and we'll extend the Trump tax cuts. We're going to protect our industries from one-sided trade deals, and we're going to bring overseas investments back to America's shores. That's right. We'll defeat the harmful effects of inflation, and we'll make life affordable again for America's hardworking people. As leaders of a nation with vast natural resources that God has blessed us with, it is our duty to restore America's energy dominance, and that's what we'll do. We have to apply common sense. We have to stop the attacks on liquefied natural gas, pass legislation to eliminate the Green New Deal, that funding. We're going to expedite new drilling permits. We're going to save the jobs of our auto manufacturers, and we're going to do that by ending the ridiculous EV mandates. And as heirs to the American Revolution and the descendants of patriots who defied tyranny, in the coming months, we are going to pass legislation to roll back the totalitarian fourth branch of government known as the administrative state. We're going to drastically cut back the size and scope of government. We're going to return the power back to the people. And in coordination with President Trump and his administration, we are going to create a leaner, faster, and more efficient federal workforce. We need to do that. Our people do not deserve to be ruled by millions of bureaucrats they've never voted for, never met, and can never hold accountable. They deserve a government that is led by those they've elected to lead. That is how Article 1 is supposed to work. That was the idea of the Congress, and we will return to that principle. The American people have called on us to reject business as usual and throw out the status quo. We must and we will heed their call. This is especially important as it comes to our nation's military. For too long, the Washington establishment has sought to appease and accommodate our nation's adversaries. They've tried to replace our military warriors with social justice warriors. It does not work. And while we're still the most powerful fighting force in the history of the world, by God's grace, the same establishment has eroded the capacities of our Army and Navy and diminished the readiness of our Air Force. We have to put an end to this madness. My friends and my colleagues, I think we should all unite in this idea. It is time now to reinstate fear in our enemies, refocus our mission on lethality, and realign our commitment to peace through strength right now. We have to prioritize the things that matter most. We have to make adequate investments in defense. This is the most dangerous moment since World War II, and everyone around the world is looking to America and looking to this body to ensure that we maintain the peace. What we're proposing now is just simply, as President Trump likes to say, a return to common sense. And he's exactly right. That message resonated across the country. I am very thankful, personally, that this body is filled with men and women who are committed to that change, to return to common sense. We can do this together. We should. It is our responsibility to do so. When I first took this gavel, many of you heard me say that I don't believe in luck or consequence. I believe in the idea of providence. And this morning, I participated with many of you early this morning in the 119th Congress Interfaith Prayer Service. It was held at St. Peter's Catholic Church. Many of you were there. It was an ecumenical service and a bipartisan service, which was great. My good friend Hakeem Jeffries began by reading with the Old Testament. He read out of Deuteronomy 10. And then I was asked to provide a prayer for the nation. I offered one that is quite familiar to historians and probably many of us. It said right here in the program, it says right under my name, it is said each day of his 8 years of the presidency and every day thereafter until his death, President Thomas Jefferson recited this prayer. I wanted to share it with you here at the end of my remarks, not as a prayer per se right now, but as really as a reminder of what our third president and the primary author of the Declaration of Independence thought was so important that it should be a daily recitation. Let me just read you that prayer. It goes like this. Thomas Jefferson's Prayer for the Nation, it's entitled. Almighty God, who has given us this good land for our heritage, we humbly beseech thee that we may always prove ourselves a people mindful of thy favor, and glad to do thy will. Bless our land with honorable ministry, sound learning, and pure manners. Save us from violence, discord, and confusion, from pride and arrogance, and from every evil way. Defend our liberties and fashion into one united people the multitude brought hither out of many kindreds and tongues. Endow with thy spirit of wisdom those whom in thy name we entrust the authority of government, that there may be justice and peace at home, and that through obedience to thy law we may show forth thy praise among the nations of the earth. In time of prosperity, fill our hearts with thankfulness, and in the day of trouble, suffer not our trust in thee to fail, of which we ask through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. That was Thomas Jefferson's prayer. Yeah. Suffer not our trust in thee to fail. We will not fail. We cannot fail. We are all in this together. Our nation is counting on us to band together and solve these problems and get this done. I've said before that I believe God has elevated each one of you, this is my belief, to your positions of leadership. And it's an act of providence that you've all been placed in your specific roles in this specific moment at this historic time, at the 250-year inflection point of the greatest nation in the history of the world. It is no small thing. We're also witnesses to the providence that spared our incoming president, President Trump, from the assassin's bullet, remarkable as that was, and to the new coalition of Americans that has risen from every creed, color, and cul-de-sac who want us to put America first. Our people are asking for a thriving economy and a rebuilt middle class and strong borders and a strong military, and we can deliver that. See, these objectives and these aims don't have an R or a D behind them. They have a USA. That's what we're about. In just a few moments, we're all going to take an oath. It is the same one oath for one nation and under the banner of one great American flag. This is an opportunity for us to protect our shared American heritage, to maintain the conditions needed for self-government, and to defend what Hakeem said earlier, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Working together, we have the potential to be one of the most consequential Congresses in the history of this great nation, so long as we work together, we do the right thing, and we put America first. As we think about all we've accomplished in the past 250 years, we can only imagine what life will be like 250 years from now. Whatever the future may look like, if we do our jobs now, we can help ensure that our civic virtues will endure, that this nation will still be an example to all the world for its greatness and its example of self-government, and that in spite of our great challenges and even our disagreements and our healthy debates, this extraordinary institution, the People's House, will still be standing strong. Thank you all so much, and God bless America.
All right, everybody, you've been listening to U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives. Speaker Johnson laying out the Republican agenda, the priorities, a return to, in his words, to common sense after winning re-election as House Speaker, overcoming resistance from a small but pivotal group of conservative hardliners after a flurry of last-minute talks, something we were watching happen in real time from the House floor. And also, he did have the help of a critical endorsement from President-elect Donald Trump, who has come out, Tim, on Truth Social, offering up his congratulations to Speaker Mike Johnson for receiving, in the President-elect's words, an unprecedented vote of confidence in Congress. He says Mike will be a great speaker and our country will be the beneficiary.
Yeah, so it wasn't just Mike Johnson we heard from. We also heard from Hakeem Jeffries a little earlier.
Absolutely.
Who said it is time for us to come together, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans, to get things done for the people. In that spirit, House Democrats work hard to find bipartisan common with our Republican colleagues in the incoming administration on any issue whenever and wherever possible.
Someone who will be following what kind of common ground they ultimately find is Bloomberg News politics editor Laura Davis, and she's been sitting by listening to all of the happenings on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives. She's there in our Bloomberg News D.C. bureau. Laura, you do wonder, okay, ultimately, after listening to the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, followed by the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, their agendas, their priorities, they certainly do not align. So you do wonder about the common ground that they will find moving forward.
Yeah, these speeches are sort of the first day of school speeches. You know, everyone's back. You know, they won re-election back after the holidays, and feeling optimistic and you know, joyful. A lot of those feelings subside, you know, really within just days or even hours. You know, Republicans have full control. They do not have to negotiate with Democrats for much of anything. They're able to use these processes where they can fast-track bills through Congress. So it's unlikely that we're going to see much bipartisan cooperation, despite some of both what Hakeem Jeffries says as well as Mike Johnson sort of alluding to working together. Really, you know, Democrats' job in this is to sort of do whatever they can do to delay and try to, you know, sow division among Republicans. Mike Johnson's job is to keep his Republican Party together. There are some divisions in that party, things that Democrats could exploit. He has a narrow majority, even narrower than he did last Congress. So this is going to be the big challenge going forward. You also have, you know, Republicans in the Senate and Republicans in the House not on the same page. In the Senate, we heard John Thune say earlier that he wants to move first with an immigration bill. In the House, they are talking more about doing taxes first. So there's a lot of ideas and, you know, only a limited sort of pathway to get some of these legislative priorities done.
What does the president-elect want Congress to do?
This is a good question. He has not weighed in. Some of his aides have really pushed for immigration to be that first priority and really leaned on John Thune in the Senate to make that path forward. What we've heard from folks in the House has said, look, you know, every time we've tried to do multiple things, you know, they sort of, in a moment of sort of shocking self-recognition, we can't do that. You know, we saw in Trump's first term, they tried to do with a health care bill that failed, and they ultimately moved on to taxes. What some Republicans are saying, look, let's get taxes done. We have a year-end deadline. If we don't act, if we don't get a bill passed, then taxes will go up. We will see sort of Trump's first-term signature legislative achievement go away. So there's a hard push there to really make sure that taxes get the priority and they aren't waylaid by other things. You know, Congress has been bedeviled by an immigration package for decades. So I think there's some concern that, you know, that even though they have Republicans all in control, that still is not an easy thing to get across the finish line.
Yep, we've all grown a little bit older watching and waiting in terms of immigration. Laura, thank you so much. So appreciate your patience and listening along and giving us some great commentary there. Bloomberg News politics editor Laura Davison in our Bloomberg News DC bureau. We do want to get back to the markets. We've got a rally underway, most notably in the NASDAQ 100, really outpacing the broader averages, but really some broad-based buying. So let's get a check on the trade right now with just about 30 minutes to go. Let's get back to Charlie Powell.
All right, I thank you very much, Carol and Tim. Here's what's going on. You mentioned the NASDAQ 100 index, big tech names pushing higher, up by 1.7% right now. To put that in context, S&P 500 index up now by 1.3%. Dow Industrials are gaining 0.8%. And on this holiday short and trading week, we've got NASDAQ up by 1.7%. 10-year, 4.59%, with a 2-year right now, 4.27%. Gold down $19 the ounce. Spot gold right now down 0.7%. West Texas Intermediate crude up by 1.3%, and Bitcoin up by 1.5%. Briefly, Microsoft plans to spend $80 billion this fiscal year building out data centers. Also, we've got spirit stocks moving lower. The U.S. Surgeon General says alcohol products like beer and wine should carry warnings of their links to cancer. Again, recapping, S&P up by 1.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. Really do appreciate it. As Charlie mentioned, we do have a rally underway today. The S&P 500 up by 1.3%. Well, President Joe Biden has blocked the $14.1 billion sale of U.S. Steel Corp to Nippon Steel, killing a high-profile deal that sparked a political firestorm and tensions between the U.S. and Japan. For more, we go now to Romaine Bostic and Alex Steele, who are sitting down with U.S. Steelworkers of America International President David McCall.
Welcome to our Bloomberg Radio and TV audiences, 3:30 p.m. here in New York. This is the countdown to the close I'm Romaine Bostic.
And I'm Alex Steele. A lot of the headlines coming fast and furious from D.C. Not only do we get Mike Johnson reelected as House Speaker, but also a lot of M&A anti-news.
Yeah, and I feel like this is going to be one of these years where Washington is really going to dominate the financial market conversation, particularly when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, and more importantly, maybe no mergers and acquisitions.
Right, and also TikTok, let's not forget that. That's coming up as well. And so speaking of, shares of U.S. Steel are down by about 5% after President Biden blocks its sale to Nippon Steel. The two companies now issuing a joint statement saying that this was a political decision and we are left with no choice but to take all appropriate action to protect our legal rights. The U.S. Steel Union praising that move on the flip side, saying it's right for our members and our national security. Joining us now is David McCall, International President of United Steelworkers. David, good to see you. Bloomberg reported,
thank you for having me.
You bet. Bloomberg reported back in November that some rank and file members were worried that the deal could fall through and that they'll eventually lose their jobs. What do you say to them today?
Well, first of all, U.S. Steel is a profitable and viable company. The CEO of the company, when the CFIUS committee first put out some concerns and what the risks were in the merger, decided he'd start making some threats about shutting down facilities, particularly in the Mon Valley here in western Pennsylvania. Right here in this facility, and these facilities here in western Pennsylvania, we make the most high quality hot bands in the steel industry and at the cheapest price. So it's just an irresponsible threat that he makes. And of course, it scares our members. It scared a lot of political leaders as well. But as I said, U.S. Steel is a viable and ongoing concern.
So you've had no conversations today with any of your members who are worried?
I've had lots of conversations with our members today, but none of them have raised an issue about being concerned about their jobs being lost because this merger has been rejected by the president. I mean, for a year now, the CFIUS committee has reviewed what the real risks are. They've spent a lot of time with the companies, both U.S. Steel and Nippon, letting them go back and forth, trying to mitigate the issue. The fact is that Nippon's plan was to eventually shut down virgin blast furnace made steel in this country and move it to a new 3 million tons down in Arkansas in electric arc furnaces. That jeopardizes our jobs, but more importantly, it jeopardizes national security in that much of the steel that's needed for infrastructure and for critical supply chains can't be made in EAFs. It has to be made in blast furnaces.
I am curious, David, as to what you're preparing for now. Nippon Steel has made it clear that they plan to challenge it. Kind of interesting, though, that they're not necessarily going directly after the Biden administration itself, but rather really trying to sort of, I guess, maybe pick away at the contours of the CFIUS process itself, which I guess gives it credence heading into a new administration with a whole new group of people that may view this deal differently. Are you prepared for that?
Well, I'm not prepared for it because I don't think there's any appeal from what the president's decision is. When CFIUS isn't able to reach a consensus, it's up to the president. The president has rejected it. But in terms of the next administration, President Trump has said on multiple occasions that he recognizes as well that the merger would be at risk for national security issues. So he's been publicly open about that on several occasions. And as far as I know, there's nothing that's changed his mind to that.
You refer to U.S. Steel as being a viable company, and certainly on paper, I don't think anyone can dispute that. But there's a reason why we got here. You've been in this business a long time. I started my career decades ago covering the steel industry. Western Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania is not the hotbed that it was. Same thing, you go to Illinois, all those steel plants that were there in the 60s and 70s and 80s, you know, they're breweries and apartment buildings. What is the future of U.S. steel manufacturing? Can it just be one or two big players and that's it?
No, I don't think so. And frankly, you know, the amount of steel that we're capable of making in this country today, we made 30 years ago. There's been a lot of technology changes. There is a lot of changes in the way we do the work, but there's also lots of changes in their equipment and in the materials and how we make steel. So we're very capable of making the steel that we need in this country. Actually, the demand is higher than our capacity. So shutting down facilities is not the way in which we can continue to grow the market.
David, Nippon Steel was going to invest anywhere between $1 and $2 billion in different areas. Have you talked to the current CEO of U.S. Steel, David Burritt, today about this?
I have not talked to David Burritt. I have spoken to the leadership from Nippon, and at some point in time, they finally started telling us what their intentions were on that capital investment, and most of it is for repair and maintenance.
Which are also important, right? Because you need to fulfill the contracts, right?
Oh, absolutely. But to just simply invest in what depreciation is, isn't growth in a company or isn't maintaining the new technology that it needs as the industry improves. So much of what U.S. Steel and Nippon's high dollar public relations campaign has been over the last year is about the price that Nippon was offering on the stock. Obviously, $55 a share is much better than the 32 or 33 bucks that it was trading at the time. So it was a good deal for investors and institutional investors. Clearly a good deal for the leadership of U.S. Steel in terms of their change in control bonuses, but not good for workers and not good for the American national security.
I know there were some questions about the investment promises that Nippon Steel were making and, whether they were rock solid or maybe a little hollow. There is a question, though, about that money, and this gets to Alex's point here. Do you think we will see that type of investment in these facilities, either through U.S. Steel or maybe even the government or some other entity other than Nippon going forward?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, in our collective bargaining agreements, we bargain for capital investment as part of our overall strength in making sure our plants are modernized. I mean, that's where our job security comes from. And look, as far as we're concerned, stockholders deserve a fair return on their investment, and that ought to come in dividends and in growth capital on their stock. Certainly the workers deserve the long-term security as well. We work on our jobs for decades, not for a couple of weeks at a time. So it's important that we maintain the facilities and that we keep them going. We're the most productive steel workers in the world by any measure.
Yeah.
So we can compete anywhere, anytime.
Just one final question, and forgive me if this is a dumb question, David, but the sentiment that you're expressing about this deal being blocked, is that sentiment truly shared all the way down the rank and file, all the way down to the bottom?
Oh, I'm sure there are many of our members who are concerned about the irresponsible threats that some of the management have made. So, I recognize that. But over the course of this last year, we've spoken to our members on multiple occasions. We've talked to the local union leadership. We've done great membership updates and meetings with them. And obviously, there's some people that's always going to be afraid of what some irresponsible threats have been made. But the vast majority of our members understand what Nippon's plan is to eventually transfer our work to electric arc furnaces and shut down our current facilities. And that's not good for our members. That's not good for national security.
All right, David, we're going to check in with you in a few weeks or months here to see how things are going. Appreciate you taking the time for us. David McCall there is the international president of the United Steelworkers. On the back of that news, that outgoing President Joe Biden has indeed blocked that $14 billion sale of U.S. Steel to Japanese rival Nippon Steel.
All right, everybody. You've been listening to Romaine Bostick and Alex Steele, our TV colleagues, of course, as we said, talking with United Steelworkers of America International President David McCall. This story about Nippon Steel and the U.S. Steel deal not happening, President Biden blocking it today, but Nippon Steel, we should point out, plans to sue over this block deal. So it is something that will continue to carry on in 2025.
You know what you use steel for?
A lot of things.
Building. Maybe that's a good segue. We talked about this yesterday during our TV simulcast.
Well done.
U.S. mortgage rates climbing closer to 7%, threatening to squeeze buyers trying to crack into the housing market. Let's do numbers here. The average on a 30-year mortgage rising to 6.91% as of yesterday, up from 6.85% a week earlier. That's according to Freddie Mac data. Higher for longer, Carol Nasser?
I don't know. It certainly feels that way. Louise Phillips Forbes is back with us. She's real estate broker with Brown Harris Stevens. She joins us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. We have a lot to talk about.
We do.
And we do want to first start off with, you were on with us last in September, so it was right before the U.S. presidential election. I think a lot of people were thinking, okay, after the election, we'd have more certainty, rates would move lower. We're not necessarily thinking that. What are you thinking about it? What are you hearing from people who want to buy properties?
I think that we're going to continue to see the rates hovering in this 6.5 and up, 7. And I don't think that there's enough I don't think we're going to see that to change overnight. Remember, in 2022, we had 11 interest rate, a historical change.
Right,
and
increases.
I just don't think that we're going to see it. The feds aren't afraid to be cautious and move slower than we want. That's one of the reasons why 2023 and 2024 were difficult markets.
But doesn't it also say that the economy is not falling apart and that the Fed feels comfortable enough to say we can keep rates perhaps higher or at this level longer, and maybe we don't cut more because we're concerned about, we've got growth, but still worried a little bit about inflation?
Yeah, I think we're going to see 100 basis points through the whole year.
Oh, you do?
I think that we could see that, but I don't think it's going to happen now. I mean, like December 18th, that 25% basis points that dropped, it didn't even make a hiccup, right? It didn't, because it was already baked into the markets. So I think that more is going to be revealed. I think buyers are constantly, we've seen the lag of absorption.
Yeah.
But we've also seen some pieces of the market are just not going to wait anymore. It's like, I'll refinance, but I don't want to pay somebody else's mortgage. In the luxury market.
When you say pay somebody else's mortgage, what does that mean?
Well, you can pay rent, and let's just say $5,000 for your rent.
So you're referring to renting. That's just
I'm talking about renting, okay. and it's also when you think about, I manage a lot of property for people who own property for an investment only, and they're paying somebody else's mortgage instead of paying their own. And I always try to talk people through the few tax benefits that we get is the tax write-off for our interest rates and for the real estate taxes. I mean, I used to get a $90,000 write-off on all the real estate taxes but now I don't get that anymore. So we'll see. Because of the SALT
2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Yeah.
We'll see if that comes back into play. I do think that is something.
The limits on mortgage interest tax deduction. Right.
Right.
Okay, so what does this mean for your world? Because you're also dealing at the ultra high end a lot in terms of a lot of properties. The people you work with oftentimes don't care about mortgages. They care about rates.
Yes,
for other reasons.
They do.
They don't care about mortgages.
They do, but I think one of the interesting things that we saw the last quarter. I mean, look, I'm probably more bullish than all people in the industry, but I'm bullish because I have a very wide ideal from 600,000 to 26 million, right? So I'm all over the spectrum of, so when your luxury market is bullish as we've experienced, the lower end of the market is slower. We have had more first-time buyers within my own personal team transacting this year in the last quarter than I did see the whole year.
Where are they transacting? Where are they playing?
I mean, they're buying in Manhattan, Midtown, East Side, and they are buying because they don't want to pay.
At what level of?
I'm talking
sale?
From 600,000. I'm in contract for something for $299,000. So it's out there.
Right. Well, that's what help us out here and try to understand, because I think there's a point where buyers say, listen, I got to buy something, right? And I think rates are kind of settling where they are. Are we getting to that point where people are saying, I'm going to get off the fence because I think we're settling down here?
I think that people are, it's one of the reasons I've had a couple of instances in the last quarter where my appraisals did not come in because what a buyer was prepared to pay in November wasn't the same in August. So that same apartment on a lower floor, for example, in August went to contract for much less money than what we saw, the same apartment 3 floors above, 3 months later. And so the appraisal, we had to go with a different bank to get the apartment to appraise because the first appraiser was very particular. And I think we're going to see some of that.
What did you attribute that to?
I attribute it to buyers are only prepared to move forward at a certain price in the summer because we had a lag for 6 months. The market was slower.
Yeah.
The market was slower, and that took longer for people to absorb and take actions. In the fall, however, 3 people were bidding on that same piece of property.
That's interesting. Like things moved. Hey, Louise, we talk so much about New York City proper and what's going on, but you deal in the suburbs too. And I'm curious about Westchester. I'm curious about Connecticut. What's happening in New Jersey? What are you seeing?
I mean, they're six, I think Connecticut was a 6.6. They're seeing a 6.6 growth of pricing, but not in transaction volume because people are still not prepared to move. There's no inventory. A house comes on the market, 11 offers are on that piece of property, and provided it's a clean bill of health from an inspection standpoint, those transactions are getting done. That is going to be great for New Yorkers, for me, because if you think about the cycle of people leaving the city when their kids are whatever age,
right,
they're going to have a lot more competition than they are in the city. And I think that's going to be an opportunity for us where we are going to see some growth, where people would have exited for the suburbs and they're going to postpone that.
I don't want to give up your surf break or anything, but you also
Please don't.
You also play in the Hamptons a lot.
I play a little bit in the Hamptons.
What's going on
I try
there?
not to tell everybody. I mean, look, that's also a secondary market.
She's a surfer.
I am a surfer. I learned at 48.
Love that.
I attribute that to my children. Love that. But, you know, the secondary market's a little bit different because, you know, we have, if you look at the last 30 years of when people used to go to the Hamptons and rent for the whole season, then came Airbnb, and then people also got to a place after COVID because prices were crazy. What would have rented for $80,000 for a month was renting for $180,000. So people would go to Europe for a month.
Right.
So we're seeing a shift in that. But the sales,
I mean, is it normalizing what's going on in the Hamptons?
Yes, the rental market is.
I mean, normal for like New York Metro, because we know it's in a whole other scale.
Yeah, it's
but
a
you know what I
whole
mean.
It's a whole nother rhythm.
Get rid of the pandemic impact. Like, are we getting back to pre-pandemic?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No. And I think that, you know, look, think about it. If the mortgage rates are 4% higher or 3% or 2%, and you're buying a secondary asset, the cause and effect of that matters more. Plus, you have a 2% land tax. You know, then you have a mortgage recording tax. I mean, it's all starts to add up. Even if you're the uber wealthy, people are thinking about their assets working for them differently.
So, you know, one of the reasons we love talking with you is just to kind of we love New York City real estate and talking about it. But I mean, I don't know, what insight, I feel like you deal with folks that have money for the most part.
Yes.
You know, and we often talked about how we've got a bifurcated world economy, if you will. Based on what you're seeing from them, I mean, how sensitive? I mean, they are sensitive to rates. Like, you talk about that.
Totally.
So,
absolutely.
Do you feel like they're more optimistic about the outlook in terms of the economy and their money and where it's spent, and when it makes sense to kind of make those? You don't make a big purchase unless you feel pretty confident.
I think part of that has to do with their own self-worth in their world of their market, of what they're doing. I mean, look, you think about all the kids that are coming out of college and how they're having difficulty finding jobs. But when you have a good job and you're good at what you do and you're a hard worker, I mean, that work ethic makes a difference. And those people that are 8, 10 years into that career, I mean, people bump around a lot more than my generation did.
Yeah.
But they're stepping stones. And, you know, I'm pretty impressed with the entrepreneurs that cross my desk and these young individuals that are so thoughtful about how they're spending and how they're saving.
But I guess what I'm trying to get is an idea of what it says you about the economy. Are people more optimistic?
I think absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, look, people don't call me if they're not feeling good.
Yeah.
So
More optimistic than the past 6 months, than the past 12 months?
No matter what side of the aisle you might stand on from a political standpoint, people were looking for change. We know what that change is. So uncertainty always causes pause. But I feel like that's one of the reasons why I had a strong November and December.
Because one thing you cross off the list kind of
I think, and I think people want to be settled.
Yeah.
Any concern about the New York City market during the next Trump administration, just in 30 seconds? Like, you know, leaders here not necessarily seeing eye to eye and then paying a price as a result of that. The president-elect, for example, wants to kill congestion pricing before it's even been implemented, for example.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the one thing that I will say, you know, about Trump is that he understands what business-friendly business is. And those policies he will be supporting, and those that he doesn't agree with, because he is not shy, letting you know what his opinions are. So I was just thinking about the congestion, like, what is that going to cost me? It's going to be about $2,500 a year for me just to go downtown to show a client an apartment, and I
mean, you're a small business owner.
I am.
And I do wonder, do you think that the Trump policies are going to be helpful or more hurtful?
I think they will be helpful. I think that the negotiating stance that he took on tariffs, I think that they will be useful, but could be scary if they go into play. But I think that he's got people in his ear that I think he will listen to.
And forgive me, I interrupted you about congestion pricing. 20 seconds
Oh,
left
I
here.
was just, listen, I think it's...
Just quickly.
It's going to be a challenge for a lot of people, but, listen, to try to get 10 blocks, I walk faster than I used to take a cab.
That's true.
I mean, that's the fact. But we have amazing public transportation, and people should absolutely leverage it.
Well, the 2-3.
The 2-3, the 4, 5, 6. I'll take them all.
Sometimes delays. Louise, always appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great
guys.
weekend. Louise Phillips Forbes, real estate broker, Brown Harris Stevens, right here in our studio.
Hey, let's get on over to Charlie Pellet for an update as we have less than 10 minutes to go in today's trade. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much. Do want to begin with a developing story headline right now off the Bloomberg Professional Service. President-elect Donald Trump has lost his latest bid to overturn a New York criminal conviction. Now, the president-elect has been ordered to appear for sentencing on January 10th. Again, repeating that headline right now on the Bloomberg Professional Service. President-elect Donald Trump has lost his latest bid to overturn a New York criminal conviction. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all higher right now. 9 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. S&P right now up 66. That is a gain of just about 1%. We've got the Dow up 305, up now by 0.7%. NASDAQ up 306. That's a gain of 1.6%. 10-year 4.59%. The 2-year 4.27%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. All right, folks, we've got just under 8 minutes to go until we wrap up the trading session, and we've actually got a rally underway. So very different tone. We've seen 5 down days for the S&P 500, the NASDAQ 100. That's not the trade today.
It is the best day for equity markets of the year.
Okay. 2 days in.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to.
This is why I adore and love your perspective. Let's get to it. Let's see what Adrienne Yamaki has to say about it. Founder and financial advisor over at Strategic Wealth Capital, joining us from San Francisco. Adrienne, tell us about, it is a little bit of a better mood today. We've had 5 down days, consecutive down days for both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. I don't know. How are you thinking about the trade today, financial markets here in the U.S. today?
Well, it's given, the incredibly strong last couple of months of the year, a few down days in the bigger picture doesn't change a lot. And yes, it's great that today is the highest trading day of the year so far. But, I think what will be really interesting to see is coming into the new administration and just seeing what's going to be implemented will tell us quite a lot about expectations for the markets going forward.
Adrienne, I want to hear kind of a wrap on 2024 because you're out there in Silicon Valley. You serve clients with portfolio assets of in excess of $5 million, income above $500,000. When you saw new money come in last year, how much of that was about the AI boom, crypto? What was it?
My clients are going to be high-income executives, and they're quite perspicacious about the importance of being diversified. They have a lot of them came from management consulting, so they tend to think more globally.
So it's not necessarily newly minted multimillionaires as a result of NVIDIA's rise over the last couple of years.
Yeah, my clients tend to be very senior executives, and I think the balance they see is a little different than. We just saw another NVIDIA board member became a billionaire over the last few weeks. That it's interesting because the one thing we haven't seen a lot of for quite a while is proof that diversification works. And the last year, ending 2024, makes it even harder to make that case. I still think that I don't think that's the right answer. No, I don't think the answer is the concentration. If we look at the S&P, 10 companies are 40% of the market cap and even more of the 2024 performance. And the question is, are we going to be able to keep seeing performance like that? And I absolutely do not think so. And it's hard when you're newly minted because you've become rich through concentration. It can be, in my experience, hard to move from something that made you very wealthy into things that will protect that wealth. But that's pretty key in terms of retaining that wealth longer term.
Yeah, all you having like the challenge of having all your eggs in one basket. If you come from a company that has done very well over the last couple of years, it can be hard, I guess you're saying, to sell those assets in order to diversify.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very hard because concentration makes wealth, and it also it destroys it very quickly.
Good point.
All right, any new buys kind of coming on your radar that you think are kind of interesting already in the new year? And I know we've only got going, but listen, we now have a House Speaker. We had a kind of an interesting day today. Hakeem Jeffries laying out his vision in terms of what's the priorities for the Democrats. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, laying out those priorities for the Republicans. There's going to be some debating going on, no doubt about it. But I am curious, as you look at the new year, is there anything top of mind for you that you're like, you know what, we're going to keep an eye on this sector or this group or this development?
Trump is going, the reason I really emphasize the platform that Trump campaigned on versus what he's actually going to be able to execute, it's a big gray box. Also, even if he expects to move certain things through, so for example, tariffs, are they going to be across the board? Are they going to be more surgical? What is he going to be able to do with inflation, with immigration? The reason the application and the specific policies do matter is for example, with immigration, I mean, we know that if he's even able to implement a fraction of what he campaigned on, it's going to be very expensive for hospitality, for manufacturing. So what we're looking at are breadth. We absolutely are looking at what are the companies abroad, Toyota, LVMH, L'Oreal. What are companies that are global companies, very strong? That's important to not forget.
We got to run. Just got some breaking news. Adrian, thank you so much. A New York judge rejecting Donald Trump's request to throw out the guilty verdict in the so-called hush money case as a result of his victory in the November election. And he is ordered to appear for sentencing come January 10th. So we're talking about in 7 days. Already an interesting 2025. We got to talk markets. Over to our TV colleagues. The closing bell starts right now.
Right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic here. Alongside Alex Steele, we're taking you to that closing bell with a global simulcast. It starts right now. Scarlett Fu in the TV studio, Carol Masser and Tim Stenovic in the radio booth as we welcome our audiences across all of our Bloomberg properties here on this Friday afternoon. Carol, a decidedly different day than what we saw yesterday. All the major indices up about 1% or so on the day.
So well said. I mean, 5 down days that we've had before this of the S&P 500, the NASDAQ 100, a different tone, some broad-based buying here on this Friday. So we'll see whether or not it holds as we get into a new week next week.
How's this for a superlative? Best day.
What?
Tim loves saying
2025.
Oh, just indulge him.
How long? Excuse me, Dad. How long do you plan to make that joke?
Well, I just made it on
I'm
radio.
just sad he got there before me, man.
I was doing like a test run on Carol earlier. She laughed.
Did it with our market guest.
Yeah. So.
And how'd that go over?
And she loved it.
She chuckled.
Yeah.
You know, we should mention though that stocks reached session highs after Johnson was reelected Speaker of the House. It's a reminder of how personnel makes policy and how politics is really going to be a driving force in the markets this year.
Okay, and just to point out, thank you, Finley. Romaine was making that exact same joke yesterday. Okay, that was the worst day so far this year.
I learned from the best.
How dare you call me out like that?
I'm just saying. We blame Finley on that one.
Said.
I am curious though too. I mean, in all seriousness, we talk about this idea of whether the price action that we're seeing today, just like what we saw yesterday, is that really reflective of what we're really going to see transpire over the next few weeks or even for the rest of the year? How much can we read into this? Think about that, Tim, and see if you can come up with a joke for that. Clapping and cheering here, and a good reason to clap and cheer here, with the NASDAQ Composite leading the charge on the day with a 1.8% gain. The NASDAQ 100 up about 1.7% here as the market tries to get its mojo back after several days of declines. The S&P 500 also higher by roughly about 74 points, or about 1.3%. It's still going to close below that 6,000 level, 59.42 and change. The Dow up about 300 points, or 0.8%, and the Russell 2000 trying to keep pace here, a 1.6% gain here on the day, up about 37 points.
Wow, that's an interesting trade. All right, guys, and if you look at the S&P 500, most names in the index actually gaining some ground today. 394 names, Scarlett, to the upside, 109 to the downside.
All right, let's take a look at the IMAP, which shows the sector performances. Spinach pie, pesto pie, whatever you like. It's all green all around. Consumer discretionary leading the way, up 2.4%, really powered by Tesla, which ended its own 5-day slide. Infotech gaining 1.6%. REITs up by better than 1.25%. The worst performers, or I should say the laggard here, is materials. Little change on the day, and the only sector to decline in 2024, losing 1.8% in the year.
All right, as you said, a lot of green, so a lot of choices for me. Rivian Automotive up 24%, guys, finishing pretty much at its highs of the session. The company coming out, announcing some production numbers for the fourth quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. I should point out that this stock, though, heavily shorted, about 19%. So any good news, you might see a bunch of short covering, but nonetheless, definitely a standout in today's trade. Rivian. Nomura, this is something that Tim talked about, Nomura Therapeutics. This biotech, very small cap name, rallying nearly 26% at its highs today, following an 81% plunge in the Thursday trade yesterday. The company yesterday saying its depression drug failed in a late stage study. Mizuho coming out today and saying the shares were oversold. So you saw some investors coming back in, and the stock finishing the day with about a gain of about 10%. One more for you. It's a small cap application software company. I kind of went to interesting places that all have kind of high short positions right now. Cerent is, as I said, a application software company. Shares soaring as much as 150% in today's session, finishing the day with a gain of 143%. The voice AI company announced an expanded collaboration with NVIDIA to advance the capabilities of its, large language model family of applications. And so nonetheless, we saw investors moving into this one in a big way. Tim?
I also just want to point out, too, Fannie and Freddie, remember them?
Oh, yes.
Up more than 20%
Yes.
here, maybe, potentially, a release from government.
Maybe, right?
All right, those are the gainers. I got the decliners. Actually kind of easy for me to find them today. I know you guys are familiar with this one on the day. U.S. Steel ticker X down 6.53%. You just interviewed United Steelworkers of America International President David McCall. We tuned in for that. Shares ended up falling today as a result of President Biden blocking that $14.1 billion sale of the company to Nippon Steel. It killed that high-profile deal. Shares fell earlier in the session as much as 8.4%. And then shares of alcohol producing companies, beer makers, wine companies, liquor companies falling today. This after U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy said that alcoholic drinks like beer and wine should carry warnings of their links to cancer. Molson Coors down 3.6%. Alcohol does cause about 100,000 cases of cancer and 20,000 related deaths each year in the U.S., according to Dr. Murthy, far more than the 13,500 alcohol-associated annual traffic fatalities. We also saw Boston Beer fall, Constellation Brands fall, and ADRs of Diageo down as well. Finally, Carvana down 11.2%, down for a second day in a row after it was accused by prominent short seller Hindenburg Research of impropriety in that report that alleged that the company's subprime loan portfolio carries substantial risk and its growth is unsustainable. Carvana did say the allegations are nothing new and said, quote, "The arguments in that report are intentionally misleading and inaccurate and have already been made numerous times by other short sellers seeking to benefit from a decline in our stock price."
All right, guys, I'm taking a look at the bond market. It was a really whippy day. It was kind of interesting, and we ended with yields higher pretty much across the curve, up by about 4 basis points. Now, just to put in perspective, 10-year is where we were on Monday. So to your point, like it's Jonathan Krinsky of BTIG was saying, it's the velocity of the move, not necessarily the absolute level of the bond market. But, guys, I got to point out, $119 billion worth of supply coming on next week, the 3, the 10s, and the 30s. So watch that as everyone kind of returns to office.
I might buy some.
Really?
Yeah.
Buy some bonds?
Sure, why not?
The bonds?
Yeah, the bonds.
Okay.
I heard it's all the rate.
Where on the curve now?
On the shortest end of the curve, Alex Steele.
1 month.
1 month.
2 seconds, baby. 5 minutes. All right, let's get to some of the stories that definitely caught our radar. This is kind of a little bit of a somber tone. This is coming from the Wall Street Journal, guys. I feel like we've been talking or focusing a lot about kind of like the sin stock area or whatever, things that aren't good for us. And this one kind of falls into it. Researchers identifying a focal point for the forces they suspect of driving up cancer cases in young people, and they talk about the gut. There's been so much more focus, right, on the gut, the health of the gut and the implications of it, but rates of gastrointestinal cancers among people under 5 are increasing across the globe.
Yeah, specifically colorectal cancer, and it's alarming doctors around the world. And the question is, what's causing it? What changes need to be made in order to prevent it from happening? And then my question is, how does the screening process change? If this is happening in younger folks, does it end up changing in coming years, government guidelines for when people are screened for these types of cancers?
Well, yeah, and also what I thought was interesting about that is sort of their range of possible explanations, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about this in a second too, but potential alcohol, right? You have the microplastics, many different things that we can kind of point to and understand, but no one knows a direct correlation, so it's hard to then wind up preventing that.
I mean, I know a GI doctor who deals with this stuff every day, and she and her family have stopped eating certain processed meats as a result of the rise in this type of cancer in young people. So the big question is, what is that link, and what are the changes we can make in our diets in order to prevent that stuff from happening?
Well, it dovetails really nicely with the big story that we've been covering all day today, one of the most read stories on the terminal. And Tim, you mentioned this earlier about the Surgeon General calling for these cancer warnings on alcohol. What does this do for people going to bars and pubs and all that? I mean, I guess we can order the non-alcoholic drinks.
There's a non-alcoholic bar opening in my neighborhood.
Really, in Park Slope?
It's so Park Slopey, but like,
that's not.
I've been to
That is
see.
such a Brooklyn thing.
It is
My
such a
gosh.
Brooklyn Park Slopey kind of thing. But you know what's interesting
Isn't
about
it
this?
just called
is
like a bodega?
No, like it's a whole bar. It's
A bar.
cute. It's fun. You can hang out. There's food. It's super cute. And then also
they make mocktails.
they make
instead of-
mocktails.
Oh, okay, got
And
it.
they probably have, I don't know, it's not open yet, but they have like non-alcoholic beers and wines, I'm guessing. So maybe that's a thing. But here's my question, guys. What was the lag time between Surgeon General warnings on like women who are pregnant don't drink alcohol to like it actually hurting sales?
It's more in the zeitgeist. I don't know.
I just totally crushed
Yeah,
that conversation
no. It's a good question, but I think it's more in the zeitgeist. It depends. If you believe the Europeans, there was no lag time. You just
Well, I mean, in all seriousness, there's a question too. I mean, when I saw this, well, 2 things jumped out at me. Was that I feel like a lot of outgoing people are pushing through a lot of things that could, of course, be overturned by the next Surgeon General. But also the question, and this gets to your idea, Alex, is like, I mean, I hate to say it, but how many people are going to pay attention to those labels? And how graphic are the labels going to be? Are they going to be like the European-style labels that you see on cigarettes?
You make an interesting point.
Or is it just going to be a little, a few words at the bottom that everyone will ignore?
We spoke to our Bloomberg intelligence analyst earlier in our program out in London, who said that in South Korea it actually had the opposite effect.
People went out and did a bunch of buying, right?
And people went out and bought more alcohol. He said, don't look to that for that happening everywhere.
Wait, they
He was
put warning
surprised
labels and people went and bought more alcohol.
Yeah,
What,
he said
like
sales went up.
defiance of what?
labels. But, but I think we're also talking like generations down, right? Like it might not affect us today, but generations down, the same way it was for cigarettes and alcohol with pregnant women, that might be the change.
Listen, I look at our student, right? You don't drink. I drink occasionally. I mean, and it's just like, it's interesting. I think you see a trend more generally, right? Of people maybe pulling back or different generations.
We have
Did
Carol say she drinks occasionally? Don't you guys have like a
we do have
cocktail guest like every week on that show?
We do have a guest today.
Today it's
Libby Wines.
Of course.
Libby
See?
today.
I'm not just making this up.
Non-alcohol.
Oh, it's non-alcohol.
Wine and
Okay, all
sparkling.
right. There you go.
It's like you knew the story was
Chris,
cross.
I might bring my own wine bottle into the studio. I'm
Right.
just going to put it out there. All right,
I
guys.
did that once. I ordered a mocktail at a restaurant, and I was like, I think this would be a lot better with just a little rye whiskey in it. And so I ordered a shot and put it in
Did you
there.
have a
It was
flavor?
great. It was delicious.
You have everyone?
Yes, I did. And I told the
All right.
waiter, I said, this would be great on the menu. You're welcome.
All right, this does not surprise me. All right, have a good and safe weekend. Alcohol or no alcohol, make your choice.
There'll be alcohol.
All right, our cross-platform, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. Be well, guys. We'll see you again on Monday, same time, same place.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors that bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Tim Stanovic. That is Carol Masser. Taking a look at how markets closed. I'm going to say it again because I'm not going to be able to say it much this year. Today, the best day of 2025. We did see the S&P 500 surge 1.3%. The NASDAQ Composite up 1.8%. The Dow up 0.8%. Taking a look at the NASDAQ 100 today, taking a deeper dive in there, that was up 1.7%, led higher by, of course, the mega cap tech companies. You heard Carol mentioning some of them earlier. NVIDIA up by 4%, Tesla up by 8.2%, Amazon up by 1.8%.
All right, folks, one of the developments crossing the Bloomberg Terminal, I was just going to jump off to the printer and actually get the story. A New York judge rejecting Donald Trump's request to throw out the guilty verdict in the so-called hush money case as a result of his victory in the November election. The decision today came down just moments ago by Justice Juan Merchan in Manhattan is a blow to Trump's effort to put the criminal case behind him before his inauguration this month.
The president-elect was ordered to appear for sentencing on January 10th, but Merchan said that a so-called unconditional discharge without imposing any term of incarceration was the best option. Quote, "This court must sentence defendant within a reasonable time following verdict," Merchan said. "The defendant must be permitted to avail himself of every available appeal, a path he has made clear he intends to pursue, but which only becomes fully available upon sentencing."
All right, just crossing, and she is reading in as we speak. Bloomberg News legal analyst June Grasso, host of Bloomberg Law on Bloomberg Radio, just trying to make some sense of all of this. Were we expecting this today? Give us a little bit of context here.
Maybe not today, but yesterday on the Law Show, I was talking to Eric Larson, Bloomberg reporter who has been following this minutely, and I said I would fall off my chair if the judge dismissed this case. I mean, it would have been ridiculous. There was a
ridiculous
jury,
why?
Because a jury handed down a verdict after a trial, a unanimous verdict, and you don't just throw those things out saying, oh, it's going to affect Trump's the way he governs. I mean, I can't really articulate anything in Trump's motion to get this case thrown out that made much legal sense. He talked about categorical presidential immunity. We heard once again that he was being persecuted by the New York DA, and this was going to affect his ability to govern. I didn't see any way this judge would throw this out, because then what does that say about the jury system?
Right,
what does it say about a jury verdict?
Exactly.
So what's a realistic way for everybody to think about sentencing in a case such as this? And I think it's fair to say an unprecedented case.
Right. And the judge has said that he's not going to sentence him to anything. It's just, even before he won the election, there wasn't one person I talked to who thought that he would be sent to prison or get much of anything besides a slap on the wrist. So the judge has to do the sentencing because he doesn't want to wait. One of the theories or one of the propositions was to wait until Trump comes after his presidency and then sentence him. Well, that doesn't make sense. That's too many years. So, I mean, the judge is going to do something that's non-custodial, not too disciplinary, and just because you have to sort of put, an end to this case so that then Trump can file for his appeal, which I'm sure he's going to do. I mean, the thought is that Trump didn't want to enter the White House.
Wait, so he's not going to be sentenced?
He is going to be sentenced, but it's not going to be anything not
significant.
The judge had said he's not going to sentence him to any prison time.
Can I ask you, if he wasn't the president-elect, would an individual in those same circumstances, any individual, Joe Blow or Jane Blow, would they be sentenced potentially to prison?
Unlikely when it's a first offense and the person is in his, in his 80s? 70s still. Okay, so he's still a young guy.
Right.
But not likely for an offense like this. It's a white-collar offense. You could say that no one was really injured in it. There's no restitution to be had. So it's unlikely that anyone would get sentenced in this case.
All right, June Grasso, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
It's been a busy first couple of days of 2025.
Bloomberg News legal analyst June Grasso joining us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio.
All right, everybody, we're going to switch gears. I have no easy segue. Break out the hand sanitizer, pack those walking shoes, because CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, is right around the corner, and we're going to Vegas. Well, we're not.
Fortunately. Dana Woolman is, though. You're going.
Oh, I'm going.
Oh, she's going. She's Bloomberg News senior tech editor. She joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. You know this because you're a CES vet, but I'm not joking about the comfy shoes and the hand sanitizer, because all you do is walk and shake hands and then get sick after this event. That's at least my experience.
Yes, and in fact, my last time there was January of 2020, right before COVID broke out. And so I was lucky that actually that year I came home mostly intact.
Well, okay, so good point. You haven't been there in a few years. Back when TVs ruled consumer electronics, this show was really a big deal. Is it still a big deal?
The show is still a big deal, but I think it's taken on different forms. So what is consumer electronics? As you said, it used to really just be a big wall of TVs.
It's this, and I'm holding up a phone.
Yeah, I mean, now it's partly an auto show, so I should say we have two colleagues from the transportation team here also attending, mostly monitoring transportation companies. But there's also everything from computing devices to a lot of personal health gadgets, many of which, by the way, will have AI built in. Expect AI to be built into just about everything, by the way. Has real shades of CES a number of years ago where everything was suddenly smart and had an app accompanying it, whether it was useful or not.
I was there that year.
Well,
the smart diaper, that was annoying.
Speaking of apps, something that we're both excited to hear about is a fully fixed Sonos app.
Yes, and you know what's funny? I had a newsletter.
We both are Sonos users.
I've been less of a Sonos user since its app update.
Mine's actually been working pretty well, but go ahead.
It's impossible to use.
I had a newsletter go out today where I was talking about tech that I was looking forward to, consumer tech that I was looking forward to in the new year. And at the very end of the list, I said somewhat glibly that I was excited for a fully fixed Sonos app so that we could really hear more about their hardware again and not so much their app changelog. And all of the reader mail I've received today has actually been about that one Sonos mention in the story.
Score.
Can I just tell a little story about holiday? It's
we don't have a ton of time.
It's a very short story. I was sitting around the dinner table with my entire family. My dad made some reference to The Sopranos, and he pulled out his phone. We started talking about something else. 10 minutes later, the Sopranos theme song comes over the speaker system because it has taken him 10 minutes to do that on the Sonos app. And we all were like, Dad, we're not even talking about the Sopranos anymore. He's like, I know, it took me this long to get it up on the Sonos because the app is terrible.
And the business has suffered. I don't want to mangle the numbers.
One man's view, I just point out, but go ahead.
I don't want to mangle the numbers, but I think the company's revenue in the most recent quarter was down something like 8% because of this, or at least in part because of this. So it's an interesting business story, and yeah, a real annoyance for all of us who own Sonos products.
What's going to be the headline coming out of CES? Do you have any idea? Got about 30, 40 seconds. Like, what do you think? Is it, I don't know.
I think it is AI, and I think it's companies figuring out where AI belongs and waiting for consumers to decide what.
I still don't know about the AI on my iPhone, and maybe that's just me being rather pathetic in technology.
Well, it mostly hasn't rolled out to your iPhone. That's coming largely this year.
Okay, so no. All right, so it's AI in terms of consumer products, right?
Consumer products, health products, and as with the smart home revolution a few years ago, it's going to be really easy to laugh at a lot of this stuff. I know one product that was teased was an AI spice dispenser. So yeah, haha. But I do think some of these products will endure, and we will still be using them a few years from now.
What, like maybe you want to put a dash of oregano in there?
I just need it to
Which
be
products
organized
I couldn't tell
properly in
you.
my
A little like
cabinet.
I love our world. I really do. Dana, thank you so much. Wish we had more time, but we're going to come back to you maybe post CES
Sure.
and talk some more. We would love to do some more. Dana Woolman, she's senior tech editor right here at Bloomberg News, here on a very busy Friday here in our Interactive Brokers studio.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Investors were buying the dip today. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing. NASDAQ 100 index today up by 1.7%. NASDAQ up 1.8%. S&P 500 index up 74, a gain of 1.3%. Dow Industrials up 339. That was a gain of 0.8%. Did turn out, however, to be a down week with the S&P on the week falling by 0.5%. 10-year 4.59%, the 2-year 4.27%. Spot gold down 0.8%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.2%. Surgeon General says alcohol products like beer and wine should carry warnings of their links to cancer, citing an increased risk of developing tumors in the breast and other parts of the body. Today we did see a lot of beverage companies moving lower. ADRs, Anheuser-Busch down 2.2%. Diageo was lower today by 3.8%. Constellation Brands, which reports next week, down by 0.3%. A New York judge has rejected Donald Trump's request to throw out the guilty verdict in the so-called hush money case as a result of his victory in the November election. Again, recapping, S&P today up by 1.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hey, thanks so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. Do appreciate it. Hey, you just heard this from Charlie, but worth repeating. Charlie going through some of the numbers and some of the names of some of the alcohol companies. Alcohol products like beer and wine should carry warnings of their links to cancer, the U.S. Surgeon General said, citing an increased risk of developing tumors in the breast and other parts of the body. Kind of the perfect day for us to talk and drink non-alcoholic wines. It's not just Dry January, but this news from Vivek Murthy coming out earlier today.
Exactly. We've slowly been kind of reaching into this space more and more aggressively. It is a perfect day to do it. We, Tim, have a perfect guest to do it.
Grant Hemingway is co-founder and CEO of Libby Wines. It makes non-alcoholic sparkling rosé and sparkling white. Grant joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Welcome, Grant. How are you?
Thank you, guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Really cool origin story here because you founded this, you have a history in the wine industry. You founded this with the former executive chair of Founders Brewing Company. Back when I did drink, I did love All Day IPA because it had a small amount of alcohol in it. Very famous All Day IPA. How did Libby Wines come together?
Well, John, my now co-founder, and I actually were connected through some mutual friends. And yes, a beer guy and a winemaker getting together. John did cut his teeth in that sessionable category, but I think it was one of those early indicators for him and for me watching from afar that this moderation wave was forthcoming. And we really wanted to lean into my
Wait, did you really see this moderation wave coming?
100%.
What were you seeing specifically?
I mean, the crystal ball that we saw was, which we couldn't have predicted, was going to be this self-regulating. Meaning there are a lot of people out there, and there's these buzzword terms, zebra striping or bookending, which
I don't know what that means.
So a session, it's like a drinking session or a socializing session in which you have a full-fledged cocktail or a glass of wine, and then you mix over to a non-alcoholic.
Okay.
So it seems to me that this is the consumption pattern happening for those that still are consuming, not the abstainers, which seem to be growing also by the day.
Can I ask you why you... I know you and I talked about it because you don't really
I'm happy
drink.
to talk about
You
it.
used to drink some alcohol.
Yeah, and even, you know, to be fair, I did have a sip of like a really nice stout that my wife opened the other night.
Yeah.
I get really bad headaches when I drink, and what I found was that the less I drank, when I did drink, the worse the headaches got with less alcohol.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, you know, it is not worth after drinking one beer to wake up and have my day the next day completely ruined. So I don't know if it's like an allergy or something, but it was, unfortunately, it was very easy for me to stop drinking because I wasn't drinking that much anyway. But what I noticed, Grant, and maybe it's just kind of like a bias of where I am in life, but a lot of my friends were having kids, they were getting into their 40s. They were like, if I need to be up early, I can't be staying out late. I need to be prioritizing rest and sleep. And this was how they were dealing with that.
And that's our exact experience too. My wife and I, we have 2 kids back in California, and really started to almost like this self-awareness or observation that we were just not drinking wine as much.
Yeah.
And it was a lifestyle thing. We, had young kids and we were managing careers, and alcohol was kind of getting in the way of that. And so it was kind of that moment, that light bulb where kind of set out and surveyed the competitive set, and nothing was really enticing from a qualitative perspective, but I I'd been 18 years in winemaking, and this was a big loss. Like, why am I not drinking the product that's supporting our career?
Well, what do your friends in the wine industry say? Because they're getting hit hard right now.
They're getting hammered. It's concerning. I mean, the downward, and you just reported on the Surgeon General, like there's an anti-alcohol movement, which I don't know that I'm all for. In our business, I would say I'm for. But generally speaking, this moderation is a cultural movement. And I think the wine industry is really waking up to it, and look no further than the results at the register.
Yeah, and it's funny to watch, kind of old television where people were constantly smoking and had a cocktail. I even think of like my dad coming home from work and had kind of a serious, spirits and cocktail, fairly regularly when we were younger. And then eventually all of that stuff started to go away, even with his generation, and easing of it.
Have you heard of California sober?
What is it now? What is it?
I know
I'm
Grant has heard of
Californian, so
California
yes,
sober.
California.
Apparently, California sober is you abstain from alcohol, but you partake in THC.
Okay.
Or everything else.
Everything else.
Wait, is he blushing?
No, he's not.
Well, no, this is just the bronzing that I get from being a Californian.
All right, so Grant, let's talk about, because you brought us a couple of sparkling. You brought us a sparkling white and a sparkling rosé.
Yes.
And I'm curious about. I'm going to pour some, and
Please.
you can kind of walk us through it. But tell us, because Tim and I have actually tried some non-alcoholic beverages, and
some better than others, we can say.
So tell us about what went into making this.
I think that was
share it around.
Yeah, the biggest white space for me was trying to take a winemaker's perspective with a wine drinking expectation.
Tim,
please.
Who's our expert?
And so I really tried to deconstruct the whole winemaking process. So where are the grapes grown? When are we picking them? How are we fermenting them? Making sure that the non-alcoholic was the end result. And so the whole process.
Do you have a glass? Or do you already have? Or did you already pour? Oh, so here, pass the glass.
Well,
folks,
it's almost happy hour.
The sausage and non-alcoholic wine is being made as we speak.
That's right.
So go ahead,
Thank
please.
you, Carol. So the whole process for me was trying to appeal to a wine drinker's expectations, and so the dealcoholization or alcohol removal process is very aggressive. It's not as exact as we'd like, and hopefully technology keeps improving. But you remove a lot of the aromatics, the texture, and certainly the alcohol, which is a massive component to the integration of the overall wine experience.
Right.
So you're eliminating roughly 14% of your product.
That's something that's really interesting. We spoke to Duncan
Did you
Fox
try it?
earlier, not yet, of Bloomberg Intelligence. He's a consumer products analyst, and he talked about this at the top of our program today, that the technology to remove alcohol has gotten so much better in recent years. He mentioned Caliber when he was a kid being a terrible alternative to it was like the alcohol-free Guinness. He called it drain backup. I don't know what he called it.
Drano, like
yeah,
Drano?
like it was Drano or something. And so what is the technology and how has it gotten so good? Like, how do you do it?
It's a filter, or there are various ways that you're doing alcohol removal, but it basically is molecular weight.
It's pretty nice.
No, this is good. This is
Yeah.
good.
I appreciate it.
And we're a tough crowd.
The process, though, it's very extracted on weight and it's selective, but it's not perfect. And so the imperfections are the removal of aromatics and the removal of varietal character. And so that's why some of the early entrants you might have seen are adding a lot back to try and replace, but it's not adequate. And so with this, it's very bright, it's very refreshing.
I got to be honest, when Grant walked in with it, I saw it, and he opened it up. I was thinking to myself, am I going to be drinking Martinelli's right now?
Yeah, that's what right?
Yeah, and I'm not. I mean, this is
Martinelli's, the apple juice, right, that we
that
give
you
our
had
kids.
when you were a kid, and it was New Year's Eve.
Yeah, totally.
This is not the sparkling apple juice.
No.
This is something different. It is closer to wine, for sure.
So is it essentially, and forgive me because I was kind of running around pouring and stuff, but so is it wine just with the alcohol pulled out?
100%. It's fully fermented grapes from California.
Right.
That we reduce or eliminate the alcohol from, and then go through the flavor composition or formula, and then carbonate it up to basically a Prosecco level. So it's really meant to replace that sparkling.
To a Prosecco level.
Yep.
Yeah.
What has your consumer research told you about when people buy this and they drink it, if they drink more than they drink of the a counterpart with alcohol in it?
I mean, my own consumer research is telling me I drink much more of it, because there's not the guilt or the shame of knowing I have to be tempered or temper my consumption on this because of what I have on the horizon. So I think what you mentioned, Athletic, at the top of the call, they have done such a phenomenal job on matching quality that people don't have to compromise anymore what they want for a beer occasion. That needs to happen in the wine category. And I think there is a massive wake-up call. We talked about the downtick in wine sales. Please.
I'm gonna start pouring the rosé. So you can either bottoms up there, buddy, and we can try this. So I'm sorry, keep going. Oh, here. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna pour me. So what's the difference? Same process for this?
Same exact process, just different grapes produced in a kind of in a rosé style. You hear that clanking? That's the swing top we've got on the bottle, so that you can.
So you can put it, close it, pop it back in the fridge. Would you like?
I'm okay.
You're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I've got to drive.
So very funny. So you close it, pop it back in the fridge, and it stays.
Yes, that was one of our learnings from, like, I think in terms of trying to be innovative around the wine category is, like, you're never going to see a champagne bottle with a swing top on it or a Prosecco bottle. They're etched in tradition.
Oh, this is nice. Did you try this?
And so with the addition of the swing top, we wanted to really do preservation.
It's a softer touch, a little bit, right?
The rosé.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Are you planning to do any non-carbonated versions?
Absolutely. Yeah, R&D, I'll admit, sparkling was more in my repertoire, in our wheelhouse.
Is it easier to do?
I would say it's easier to replicate or replace a sparkling.
Yeah.
But the still wine category, I think, is very, it's a huge opportunity for the category. If we're to nail a Chardonnay or a Sauvignon Blanc or a Pinot Noir, a lot of drinkers out there, and you talked about who is this consumer?
Yeah.
It is definitely the wine consumer that is self-moderating.
What I'm also finding is bars, restaurants, parties, social events, professional events have increasingly non-alcoholic options that are not soda.
Huge real estate being garnered by the mocktails and commanding quite a price. But I think it's about, more options for inclusive occasions, making sure that everyone is able to participate. And not feeling sheepish or needing to, go with the lime in a seltzer water as the chameleon.
All right, so you introduced this October, is that
Just
right?
October.
All right, so I know this, but we're Bloomberg. So give us any indications of the kind of demand you're anticipating or maybe already seeing.
So in 18 years in wine, this would be the 5th startup for me. I've never seen something like this. And to your point, October, we didn't have a lot of data behind us.
Yeah.
But we have gotten so many fortunate retail programs in anticipation of Dry January, big moment.
Right.
And
good timing.
Could not be, we're blowing away our goals. And obviously the proof will be in the pudding with repeat business and velocity, but the early adoption has been through the roof.
Funding, self-funded, raise money, how have you done it?
Raised a fair bit of money, went to the outside for the first time, but John and I actually self-funded the initial. Wine is a very capital-intensive business.
Yeah.
You guys likely know this, but we feel like the category is not a fad. This thing is here to stay. It's going to keep growing. The retailers are now starting to get behind it, which is a massive win.
Well, happy Dry January.
Yes.
Promise to come back soon. Let us know how things are going. Grant Hemingway, co-founder and chief executive officer of Libby Wines. And we're heading to a break. This is Bloomberg.
9:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg, and up Friday, losing week on the week. The S&P 500 index was down by just about 0.5%, but green on the screen today. Heading into the weekend, the S&P stands at 5942, up 73, up by 1.4%. The Dow up 339, up 0.8%. Nasdaq today advanced 1.8%. The Nasdaq 100 index up 1.7%, and a broad-based rally with the Russell 2000 index of small-cap shares gaining 1.6%. 10-year 4.59%, with a 2-year 4.28%. Spot gold down 0.7%, 26.38 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.2%, 74.03 a barrel. Adrienne Yamaki is founder and financial advisor at Strategic Wealth Capital, and right here on Bloomberg Business Week today, she told us she is awaiting specific Trump policies.
I think what will be really interesting to see is coming into the new administration and just seeing what's going to be implemented will tell us quite a lot about expectations for the markets going forward.
And speaking of which, next week going to be a busy week. We will be getting that jobs report 1 week from today. New York's controversial plan to charge drivers for entering Manhattan's central business district beginning on Sunday, facing a last-ditch challenge from neighboring New Jersey. After hearing arguments for about an hour and 20 minutes, Judge Leo Gordon called a brief recess and said he would be coming back and advising the parties on, quote, what comes next. We'll keep you up to date with the very latest. In the meantime, one other important story today did get word from the judge in the Donald Trump case here in New York. A New York judge rejecting Trump's request to throw out the guilty verdict in the so-called hush money case as a result of his victory in the November election. For on-demand news, 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hey, thanks so much for that update. Carol, we just talked about sparkling wine. Check. Let's talk about food, because we actually waste a lot of it here in the U.S. The USDA estimates that between 30 and 40% of the food supply is actually wasted.
That kills me.
It kills me.
How many times have we talked about there's so many people who are, what do they call it?
Food insecure.
Food insecure.
Yeah.
So you've got that going on. And then at the same time, we have tremendous waste in this country.
So part of it is us, buying stuff and not using it. But a big part of it also is just poor planning when it comes to grocery companies, when it comes to food spoilage in the supply chain. It's a very complicated thing.
Not good, right?
Yeah, it's not good for our wallets. It's not good for the cost of food. And it's not good for the environment.
Right. Ronnie Neff is Associate Professor in the Department of Environmental Health and Engineering at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, focusing on the connection between food waste and climate change. We should note, of course, the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Ronnie joining us from Baltimore. It is good to have you here with us. It kind of breaks my heart that we continue to have these conversations about the amount of food waste that is going on. But share with us a little bit more in terms of context of how much is being wasted. We mentioned a little percentage, a big percentage, at the kickoff to this, and why this continues to happen.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the chance to be on this show. So, it's a staggering percentage of our food supply, and by one estimate, at the national level, we're talking about throwing out the equivalent of $495 billion. And if you put that, you were talking about food insecurity. If you put that in terms of meals, it's over 190 billion meals per year just thrown out. And so, I'm sorry, it's 149 billion meals.
Yeah. It's incredibly depressing.
Incredibly depressing. It's so much food. And so, and then if you think within our households, every household on average is throwing out about $1,500. And there's not many people that you could go to and say, like, hey, you want to throw out $1,500? And they'd be like, sure, no problem. It's a lot of money that we didn't need to have been throwing out.
Is it just?
Wish you could talk to my 5-year-old. Like, when you making food for kids is like, you just asked for this and now you're not going to eat this.
No, but it's like,
Kills me.
it's interesting. I was listening to the surveillance team and I was thinking about how I grew up and we had 2 refrigerators. We had a freezer.
Well, how many kids did you have?
There was 7 kids. It was a big family, but nonetheless, there was always major shopping, trips and so much food. And I get it. My daughter, who spent some time over in Europe, said, we used to shop every day and we bought a little bit. We had a small fridge, in our it's just a different way of thinking. And is it the way Americans think? Is that the problem? What is it? Is it that we just are an abundant economy, although not everybody feels that way, certainly in the U.S. economy, but what is it?
Yeah, it's so many different things, and that's part of what makes it challenging to address it because there are so many different things going on. But I think that you've hit on a lot of really important points in terms of the cultural factors and that we have this idea that we need to have abundance. And if we're not providing abundance, we're not providing well enough for our family. Another one is this idea that food is only going to taste good if it's absolutely the freshest. And if you think about whether it's frozen vegetables cooked into a meal or something that's a little bit older, you would never know the difference. And so kind of digging into some of those issues as well. There's a lot of upstream factors going on in terms of the package sizes and other things that could be done by the food industry and elsewhere that could also prevent this. And then one other cultural factor that's important, I think, is just how unplanned a lot of our lives are and how, we thought we were going to be home. We bought this food for that, and then something happened, and so we weren't. And so really needing to strategize around the reality of our lives.
I'm wondering about the connection with climate change. I mean, there's a few issues here. One of them obviously has to do with the resources that go into actually bringing food to the table, greenhouse gases along the way. Then there's also the element of raising that food, watering whatever you're doing, whatever you're growing, feeding a cow, everything associated with the cow. But then there's also throwing it away versus composting. What sort of has the biggest impact when it comes to our environment?
So the biggest impact starts with the production, as you were saying, and in particular meat production. But then throwing it out in the landfill is also tremendously impactful. And so if you think of climate change, we're putting basically the equivalent of 42 coal-fired power plants worth of greenhouse gas emissions into the air every year from food that gets wasted. And there's a group called Project Drawdown that ranks climate solutions, and they do all this complicated modeling, and they come out with, the potential impact based on feasible changes. And at a global level, wasted food comes out as the top solution that could make an impact on global climate change over the next 20 years. It's, and again, if you ask people, what do you think are the top 5, the top 10 climate solutions? I don't think food waste would be on very many people's lists. So I think that there's a lot of need to raise some more awareness about that.
Totally agree, Ronnie. And I do wonder, sometimes you raise the cost of things and people are much more careful, right, about waste. And I don't know if ultimately that leads to change, that you're less likely to overbuy because you don't want the waste because you can't really afford it because it gets so expensive. If you could change one thing in our system that would get to this 30 to 40% of the food supply being wasted, what one thing might that be? And just got about 40 seconds.
Because that's so hard, because there's so many different things that we need to do and they all need to work together. So I guess, gosh, if there was one thing, I think it would be having everybody, whether it's consumers or businesses or anywhere, tune in to the amount of waste that's happening, because I think one of the biggest challenges is that we're really not aware of it and we just throw out a little bit here and a little bit there and it adds up. And so if we look at what's going on, then we can strategize about what are the solutions that are most important in my household, in my business, to reduce the waste of food.
Yeah, right. Awareness and having an understanding of what's going on. That's kind of often the first step. Hey, Ronnie, thank you so much. An important issue, and we're so glad we could spend some time with you on it. Ronnie Neff is Associate Professor in the Department of Environmental Health and Engineering at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
I'm looking forward to explaining that to my 5-year-old.
It's hard with
Stop asking for another chicken nugget if you're not going to eat it.
It's tougher with kids. It is tougher with kids. But I think, I don't know. I'm guessing we all waste a lot of food.
Yeah.
We're trying. We're really trying.
Just eat it.
Just eat it. Just eat it.
Just eat it.
Sounds like a dad, right? All right, guys, don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to wrap up here on the Friday edition of Business Week, and this is Bloomberg.
Listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Nasser and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
All right, everybody, we are getting ready to wrap up on this Friday. First 2 trading days of 2025. They are on the books, I guess, as you could say. What's interesting?
1 day higher, 1 day lower.
That does not necessarily make a trend, although we shall see what is in store. Safe to say that the month of January is going to be chock full of lots of stuff. You've got the inauguration, you've got earnings starting to kick underway just about midway through the month. JP Morgan and the big banks kicking it off. And then you've got a Fed meeting towards the end of the month, not to mention a lot of economic data points. So there's going to be a lot coming at us in terms of fundamentals, on the economy, on the earnings front, what CEOs have to say, and then you've got a new White House and what we start to hear in the way of policies.
The S&P 500 is up 1% so far this year.
Are you looking at the year-to-date?
Year-to-date. I want to look at one of the most read stories. It's number 20 in the last hour on the Bloomberg terminal. Usually I don't go down that far. The reason I did is because a lot of the stories in the top 20
are probably
about Mike Johnson,
right?
About Congress.
Speaking of policy, right?
Things we covered quite a bit earlier in the
So where do you
session
wanna
today.
go?
I want to go to congestion pricing.
Did we get a ruling?
We didn't get a ruling yet.
We didn't get a ruling.
Bob Van Voorhis, though, on our Bloomberg News team here, writing just in the last half hour that New York's controversial plan to charge drivers for entering Manhattan's central business district starting on Sunday is facing a last-ditch challenge from neighboring New Jersey.
Leave it to we from New Jersey to kind of muck things up a little bit. New Jersey went to court today to urge a federal judge to stop the congestion pricing plan's launch while U.S. transportation officials provide specifics from their environmental review of the project that he ordered earlier this week. The hearing in Newark capping really what is a high-stakes showdown between the two states with billions of dollars in toll revenue on the line for modernizing New York's more than century-old transit system. But listen, I commute from New Jersey every day. I use a train, but there are a lot of folks that are crossing either at the tunnel, the two tunnel crossings, or at the bridge. There's a lot going on back and forth, and so I could see why New Jersey's very involved in this.
I guess critics of the opposition to it might say, do the people who drive in need to be driving in? Is it better to take public transit?
Which is very maxed out, and we, often talk about some of the problems in New Jersey transit, whether it's electrical, system-wide.
Not just New Jersey transit. I mean, when people come to New York, this is worth explaining, I think, to people outside of the New York City area. But if you live in different parts of the tri-state area, you could be taking New Jersey transit, or you could be taking the path.
Trains or buses.
You could be taking trains or buses. If you live in Connecticut, you could be taking a different commuter line. Metro North, which is also run by the MTA. Then you get to New York City, and then you're dealing with the subway.
Right, exactly.
To get to your final destination.
There's a lot of different systems, and there's a lot of crossing in and out of New York City as well, whether you're coming from Staten Island, whether you're coming from New Jersey, whether you're coming from Long Island. What's interesting is New Jersey has called it the congestion pricing program a brazen money grab, and argues that the plan would increase congestion and tailpipe emissions on its own turf by pushing drivers onto the state's highways and bridges to skirt the toll.
After surviving other legal challenges, the program was thrust into doubt on Monday when the judge ordered the federal transport officials to provide more information about their review and approval of the plan. I would note that they did implement a congestion pricing of sorts in London's central business district.
Right.
At first, it was very unpopular, faced a lot of opposition. And in recent years, it's become incredibly popular, and it's expensive. And folks who live there and have lived there, I had one tell me it saved the city.
I think that's really fascinating. And I was talking to my daughter about it, who spent about a year in London. And she said that there was also, an awareness that it improved the environment, actually, because there were less cars driving in and around. I don't know. I think many would argue that we need better transportation. We need a cleanup of the existing system. We need a modernization of the existing system, because safely say, right, there's a lot more people coming in and out of New York and using the mass transportation system. So I don't know. We'll have to see what happens.
Our own Bloomberg team reporting back in June that New York City has the world's worst traffic congestion, costs $9 billion in lost time. A typical motorist driving through the most populated city in the U.S. lost 101 hours last year because of traffic during peak commuting times, the most among nearly 1,000 cities across the globe. This is according to the 2023 Global Traffic Scorecard from INRIX. It's a traffic data analysis firm.
All right, so this is one of those things we're waiting for. I don't know. You bring it up in our newsroom, and man, you got some different issues. People who are driving in and out are really finding this annoying.
Even people who don't have cars are very passionate about this.
My husband and I have been talking about it because we scoot through the city a lot sometimes, or on the weekends. I guess this applies on the weekends as well, right? It's all the time, I would assume.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that if you come in and then you scoot over to the West Side Highway or the FDR, that I think the charges are taken off.
I don't know how that works.
Because sometimes you've got to work your way through to get there because you're trying to get to Uptown, or you're trying to get to Long Island, or you're trying to get from New Jersey. I mean, that's why we often go through New York City.